Our story begins inside a warehouse with a few people sprawled near a gun that has just been used. Then our protagonist, confused by the scene, says he doesn't remember how it was when he kicked the bucket. But soon some tentacles emerge to remind the fellow of his fateful day, making him flee desperately from the long arms that tried to reach him at all costs. In fact, he runs towards the gun and, quickly turning to aim at his pursuer, fires a few shots while recalling that he had a monster and an angel in the mix. And when he thought he would only have one more boring day of work in his mediocre life, he found himself pierced by one of the monster's arms. The guy felt the tentacle consume him as the agonizing pain took over his being. But suddenly, a red-haired warrior in golden armor appeared, striking blows against those arms to save our boy, who watched everything pressed against the wall while she defended him. The creature was defeated, and the boy, out of strength, slid to the ground, feeling the syrupy substance flow down his body and thought his time to leave had come. Then he heard the footsteps of that imposing warrior walking towards him, and as he faced her shining in the circumstances, he felt a thread of hope despite the pain. The warrior, who was actually an angel, knelt before the dying man and informed him, while healing him, that the people would be fine thanks to his cunning. Good ones, follow me. However, fate wanted the angelic redhead to spike her efforts to be unable to save our hero who had just saved the world. But still, he felt proud, for deep down he always wanted to fulfill that purpose. The warrior rested her hand comfortably on the boy's, who before passing away wished to know the name of his savior. And with a serene expression, she revealed herself to be Relina, the Valkyrie of Dawn. Noah then felt his eyes grow heavy as the angelic warrior assured him of a peaceful departure. His consciousness then wandered into the unknown, and questioning the recognition of his deed, the image of various monsters facing a kind of warrior appeared. It was our Noah wielding a red-bladed spear against an armored lion that was charging fiercely towards him. Then skillfully thrusting the beast, the warrior did not imagine he would need to save the world once again. However, he seemed already accustomed to facing the legion of monsters that crossed his path. Our hero wandered through space wondering if he had really died as he realized that everything inside him felt hollow. He tried to organize his mind and discover who the monster and the angel were that plagued his recent memory. Noah looked around trying to understand what place that was, and judging he was in the afterlife, began to call out, "Hello, is anyone there?" Then the slurred voice of a cosmic being approached, revealing that our protagonist had something that was desired. Noah looked at that being filled with doubts and discovered he was facing the embodiment of emptiness that controlled all astral realms. He heard the spirit of emptiness explain that his soul had been scattered in pieces across the astral rifts, but fortunately, the little that remained was enough to recreate him. Then, before a ball of blue energy, our protagonist thought it would be nice to thank for the opportunity. However, even holding that breath of life in his hands, he was unable to feel it touching his skin. The spirit stated that it did not expect gratitude from our protagonist, but ordered him to keep the seal in his possession. And the boy, filled with questions in his mind, wanted to know what the seal was about. The spirit guided him to search within his soul, for that way they could access his astral map through spells. Noah asked how to access his own soul and thought he had no idea how to do that. But to avoid angering that sinister god, he decided to try and began to take deep breaths to access his inner self. Suddenly, a light enveloped him, and his system window appeared, informing him that his astral map was complete. Noah touched the suspended window that looked more like an identification card with his name, race, status, and most importantly, no items. He read that the seal was fused into his soul and asked the spirit of emptiness how that had happened. The big guy twisted his arms in space and bellowed to the boy that separating the seal from the soul was an unpleasantly, nearly impossible task. Noah commented that it was not good news, but the spirit said there was still a solution for the case. And before the incarnation, where Noah was a warrior with his red spear, the spirit seduced him to give up his soul in exchange for a new life with incalculable powers. Noah felt pressured by the offer and asked what would happen. If he refused such a call, then the wicked spirit explained that if the young man refused, his soul would be consumed until the entire essence of the seal was absorbed. Our protagonist, realizing he had no choice, suggested that he should get a lawyer, as he would not sign a contract without reading the terms of agreement. But the spirit, lacking patience, explained that the pact between souls was not governed by mortals but rather executed through the force of spirit. Noah tried to bargain with the divine being, wanting guarantees that he would not be harmed if he agreed. However, quite straightforwardly, the creature said there were no guarantees. Then the system reappeared with the message of the agreement, and our protagonist realized that with each passing second, he was forgetting more and more of his past life. Noah was no longer sure of what his body was like or even of feeling alive, and with his finger hovering over the acceptance of the pact, he wondered what the price of such an agreement would be. Therefore, he decided to decline the offer, understanding that pacts with entities of the void could not be a good thing. Noah turned to the spirit and asked what was stopping him from just taking the seal, since the being was an all-powerful god. The voice of the creature echoed in the space as it said that Noah had a disconcerting soul and thus grabbed our young man with its dark tentacles. Noah felt himself suffocating in the embrace of the arms surrounding him, while the spirit's voice remained unyielding regarding his decision. The divine being extended its hands, from which the tentacle threads emerged that bound Noah's body, who was tirelessly trying to escape its grasp. The two stared at each other, and Noah, undaunted, heard the spirit say that it would make him a messiah after removing the seal from his soul. Suddenly, the system appeared with a new proposal for Noah, indicating that he could accept to be the so-called messiah of the creature that commands the void. But the young man, furious, replied that he would not accept any agreement made by the cosmic being. Noah saw his astral body being consumed little by the creature's arms, which seemed intrigued by the young man's resistance to the offer of becoming a god among mortals. Our protagonist shouted, determined that he would never bow to a monster, and the spirit tried once more, asking what was necessary for the young man to yield. Then the tentacles were undone, and Noah, nearly asphyxiated, remembered the divine being's words about strong spirits being capable of controlling the pact. The young man rose and proposed that if he himself controlled the pact, he would never go against the god of the void. But the spirit saw no benefits in this agreement, judging that it would only take a snap of its fingers to remove Noah's existence from eternity. And the young man, eloquent, incited that the all-powerful had not done so yet because, in truth, it was incapable of performing such a feat. The hooded figure let out a laugh at the recklessness of the mortal who believed himself superior to its cosmic and phenomenal powers. And out of nowhere, it invoked an agreement without consent that our protagonist would become one born of the void, thus beginning the transformation. Noah shouted indignantly as the being's voice declared that his soul was bound to the void forever. And when the system confirmed Noah's rebirth, the dark voice of the incarnation of the void echoed curiously to know how the young man would use his new powers. Noah felt his body being sucked in as if he were entering a black hole, and thus he arrived at a temple where hooded men were performing a ritual to invoke the Lord of the Abyss. As those voices echoed repeatedly in invocation, our young man rose somewhat dazed, wanting to know what had happened, and the monks were incredulous to realize that the Lord of the Abyss was capable of uttering words, until a bald warrior appeared dragging something, and the frenzied monks began to praise the Lord of the Abyss again. Noah then saw a gagged woman being thrown at his feet while those present claimed to be honored by his presence, and upon realizing that she was an offering, our young man expressed a look of indignation. The executioner drew his swords from their sheath, and Noah, frozen, watched the scene not knowing what to do. The young man felt sweat trickling down his face, aware that he needed more information. Then he opened the system to check his abilities, and a message appeared about the current mission, where he was to flee from those unfamiliar faces. Indignant, our protagonist rose and began to pat himself down, questioning whether he had become some kind of elemental ancestor. He looked at the monks and demanded answers about where he was, which left the religious figures profusely anxious. Then, one of the hooded figures informed, somewhat nervously, that this was the Abyss of Arander, and they had invoked him to ask for a blessing in exchange for sacrifice. And, getting into character, Noah replied in a furious tone that he did not appreciate being awakened from his slumber for a mere mortal favor. The monks fell into despair, trying to explain that there had been a misunderstanding, as this was a material abyss and he could come and go as he pleased. Our protagonist became thoughtful, as he needed clearer information to understand the play. Then he opened the advantage window with the identification skill, and even while not fully awake, decided to use it to discover who the people in front of him were. Identifying an abyss cultist, the bald executioner, and the girl from the offering stretched out on the ground, whom he judged to be not very happy. He thought that if he saved her, she could help him get out of there. Noah tried to search the system for a distraction plan and took from his inventory a scroll that was a letter with direct information from the Master of the Void. Our young man decided to interpret the Lord of the Abyss once again and told the devotees that he would grant them the blessing as long as the woman survived, and he ordered to the surprise of the monks that she would be his servant. Then he intimidatingly asked if they would refuse. And completely flustered, one of the devotees explained that sacrifices were part of the pacts, but Noah decided that from that moment on, the rules would change. In the face of the panic that ensued, our protagonist raised his arms, interrupting the other's tantrum, and walked towards the girl. Noah crouched down in front of the young woman and whispered, in case she could hear, that even though he didn't know what was happening, he would get her out of there. Thus, he raised his hand and spoke in an imperative tone that the girl belonged to him, until suddenly a voice echoed in the air asking with what authority the young man was doing this. Noah quickly looked in the direction of the voice and, with the identification skill, recognized a dome of monks who seemed to be the elders of that macabre sect. Our young man, still holding the dying girl, realized that things were about to get serious as one of the gossiping monks told the boss about the Lord of the Abyss's intentions. Furious, the boss shouted to everyone that he was just a human and ordered them to capture Noah. Suddenly, the mission that indicated to flee changed to ending everyone in the same proportion, and Noah, like an NFL player, flew against the bald executioner, disarming him. At the moment of the fall, the executioner dropped a key that went unnoticed by our hero, who was only thinking about punching the man repeatedly. Trembling, the bald man glanced at the key, and Noah ceased his blows upon noticing his worried expression. Then suddenly, he released the executioner and grabbed the key like a football, throwing it like a quarterback in the direction of the girl to save her. However, the executioner had gotten up and grabbed his sword to confront our young man, who, upon noticing him, quickly turned around, assuming a fighting stance. The bald man, without hesitation, wielded his blade and ran towards Noah, who cautiously studied his movements. But before he could defend himself, he felt a shadow dominate his arms, forming a sinister reflection that smiled on the ground. Without mercy, the executioner thrust his sword into our hero's chest, who saw his HP drop to almost zero before being thrown back by the blow. The executioner prepared the killing blow, and when Noah turned around still weak, he despaired upon feeling that the blade was now on fire. And for a fraction of a second, he realized he had not been hit by the blow, for the body of the executioner had been incinerated before him by the slave who now, imposing, revealed her power while the monks tried to attack her. The woman then calmly made a movement with her arm, and another burst of fire spread across the altar, and the devotees who were heading towards her were consumed by whirlwinds of incessant flames with no chance to defend themselves. The boss, already furious, shouted that he would personally deal with the traffic light juggler. Meanwhile, one of the monks was running towards Noah, who was writhing on the ground with only 8% HP. But our protagonist would not give up, and despite the difficulties, grabbed the sword that was by his side, and he quickly got up to take down the religious man mercilessly, while the shadow emerging from his arms reflected serenely on the ground. With the monk's body finished off, our protagonist completed the mission of eliminating the enemies and also, on top of that, save Aurelia Foster, but since he had no path, he could not receive. He experienced points, so the system asked if he wanted to open his paths, as there were some very good cleansing baths. Noah's HP gradually decreased while the system awaited his confirmation to choose a path. However, even before making his choice, the young man could not sustain his body and fell, imagining that dying this way seemed like a joke. He felt his body plummet as he was transported to the astral space once again. But suddenly, his eyes slowly opened, and the young man found himself in front of a machine that catches bears. And when he looked around, he realized he had woken up inside a game store. Then he noticed a guy with glasses commenting that he was waiting for him. He was a store employee with a badge that read Dylan and waved to our protagonist. Noah promptly wanted to know who the guy was, as well as what new place he was in. But Dylan asked if, by any chance, our guy was another emissary of the Void who was there to mess up the shift again. Noah didn't know how to respond, and sensing our protag's nervousness, the store employee decided to explain what was going on around there. He introduced himself as Dylan, but emphasized that wasn't his last name since Noah's subconscious didn't want to give him one. Our guy crossed his arms without remorse for that, and Dylan revealed that he represented the void of his astral space due to the established pact. Noah casually walked over to an arcade machine and deduced that the whole place belonged to his astral map. The game screen lit up, congratulating Noah for receiving a prize diamond that would grant him 3 paths at once, and wanted to know more about his astral map. Dylan explained that the map was part of Noah's soul and that it was a magical manifestation, but deep down he felt anger because humans never know anything. The representative of the Void also revealed that the store referenced Noah's ancestry and asked if the place felt familiar to him. With a nostalgic expression, Noah commented that it really reminded him of his childhood, and while unleashing Hadouken, wanted to understand the purpose of being there at that moment. Dylan also didn't have the answer as it wasn't his job, but he judged that the guy was there for some special circumstance, so he suggested he press start. The game screen entered astral fight mode, and upon accessing the character in use, detected some anomalies with past lives, but it offered some classes for Noah to choose up to 3 if he wanted, and the guy became curious about how to choose his path. Dylan explained that our hero had 4 attributes: strength, constitution, agility, and magic. These were responsible for the aspects of his abilities, and in front of the machine, showed that the paths increased the attributes, making him stronger. However, high paths could generate potential blockages, so Dylan decided to show in practice if the guy chose to be a warrior, for example. The path would always give him attribute rewards upon leveling up, but they would be quite common. And passing through other classes like fighter, artist, or rogue, Dylan showed that they would all be very similar. The employee informed that there were more options in other machines, and Noah agreed to check since he found the first one a bit dull. The guy with glasses stopped in front of a healing focus arcade and mentioned that it was very important, so Noah decided to take a look. Observing the possibilities, our hero commented that he almost died before getting there and asked if next time he would be healed if he chose that path. Dylan explained that, in fact, when you die, time passes more slowly until the new awakening, and with the healing path, Noah would have a few extra minutes to try to survive. Listening to the guidance, our protagonist paused curiously about a path called Exsanguinator, where he could drain the blood from enemies to heal or harm at his leisure. Noah seemed to enjoy the ability, and Dylan, who agreed, commented that it was true healing through suffering. Determined, our guy took the path, and now only 2 remained. Dylan followed Noah's choices until he pointed to a path he deemed important for our guy. It was the path of Herald of the Void, but despite granting endless darkness in the material world, Noah had no interest in being anyone's puppet, despite the pact. Noah continued to search for the path at a leisurely pace until he found the interesting Astral Wanderer, which allowed him to roam between realms beyond the Void, as well as the Void Hunter, which granted him the instinct to hunt anything that appeared in his way. Thus, our hero selected his 3 classes and quickly maneuvered the joystick to confirm his choices. Upon pressing start, Noah felt something change in his body, and shadows began to emerge from the walls, slowly consuming him completely. Noah felt a certain discomfort with that symbiosis, and Dylan, satisfied with the scene, commented that the process could be a bit agonizing. Our protagonist could do nothing but cursed his path instructor, and as the claustrophobic upgrade dragged on under Dylan's curious eyes, the system was slowly completing our hero's status. Then Noah awakened and tasted liquid iron in his mouth. He felt his body tingle as he rose, and the exsanguinator path was activated automatically. Thus, with his hands over the tomato broth, he realized that his vitality was slowly recovering. And upon receiving the information that he had 5 minutes left for a full recovery, he decided to lie down in the calm blood without stress. But the brawl was still raging between the boss of the Abyss monks and Aurelia, who was taking quite a beating from the old man. And seeing the abyssal form of that cultist, the fire sorceress faced the enemy, pondering how to find a strategy that could destroy him once and for all. Until a new mission arose for our bloodsucker, where he had to defeat Victril Mayfar, who was the boss of the monks, and gain a rare skill. But for that, Noah needed to not die this time. Aurelia maintained her combat position while the dark arms of the cultist struck in her direction. She blocked as much as she could, and when it was her turn to attack, unleashed fiery bolts against the opponent without hesitation. But while the monk boss seemed to be enjoying the battle, our sorceress was giving her all to defeat him. Noah, who was recovering, anxiously studied the mission, wondering what he could do to gain an advantage in that fight. Then he began to distribute his attribute points, trying to find the best way to balance his power. And when he finished, he received some significant boosts that greatly improved his status. Aurelia continued to attack fearlessly at her enemy, who caused some stalactites to fall to block her. But the young woman quickly retreated, dodging all of them. And with mastery, she set some rocks on fire, hurling them like a shield towards the old bald man who did not expect the onslaught. However, in a shrewd manner, the cultist mage created a protective globe with his dark arms and avoided the fire damage. Noah picked up the executor's sword he had defeated and stored it in his inventory as he stood up, almost recovered, until he caught a glimpse of Aurelia being thrown against the wall and felt the shadow consume the room as the old monk floated sinisterly. Victril's eyes showed curiosity when Noah shouted to him that it was all a misunderstanding. And he explained that he was an emissary of the incarnation of emptiness and his mission was to deliver a direct message to the leader of the cultists. Suspicious, Victril asked if Noah thought he was a fool, but the young man tried to be convincing, extending his hand with a scroll to the old man, and informed him that the emptiness had sent a response for his devotion. Victril stared at the document for a few seconds, and Noah waited for the reading to bring something positive. But the old man became even more furious, considering that lying about the incarnation of emptiness was the greatest heresy. Noah then realized that the strategy had failed and used the astral wanderer's path for the first time, and he disappeared before Victril, who was attacking him with his long dark arms. Our protagonist seemed to levitate in another dimension where everything around him presented a different hue. Then he quickly opened his inventory to take out the longsword he had taken from the executor and without hesitation, hurled it at the old man with all his strength. Victril felt the blade stab him at shoulder height and Noah slid to prepare for the next attack. And while the old man tried to pull the sword lodged in his heart, the young man shouted for Aurelia to set the playground on fire. The sorceress then grabbed the monk boss and hurled him with a fury that seemed to have been stored inside her for centuries. Victril, with no chance of defense, crashed against the rocks of the wall as the blade sank deeper into his flesh. Not satisfied, the fire girl jumped once more onto the religious leader and unleashed a flurry of flaming punches mercilessly. Then to finish, she raised her leg and smashed down on the old man who became buried in the ground. Noah didn't know whether to be incredulous at the woman's strength or at his status, which began to evolve considerably, in addition to receiving a bunch of rewards. Suddenly, Noah opened his arms and threw himself on the ground, ecstatic from the victory achieved, but Aurelia approached and said that the guy had a lot to explain. With her arms crossed, the woman wanted to know how he had been summoned to the altar circle, but the relaxed young man thought she should just chill out since she was safe. Then with a serious expression, she activated the little fire and, even grateful, said she would only relax if she knew everything about our prota. Aurelia asked if Noah was a human from that world, and the young man took his time answering, fearing they would eliminate anyone who wasn't from there. But with courage, he took a deep breath and was honest in his response. "No, I am not from here." Aurelia asked if Noah was aligned with the cultists or the Iron Fists, and the young man truthfully denied both. Then he explained to the woman that he didn't know anything around there, and she looked at him, analyzing whether she should trust him. The witch apologized for her behavior but explained that she had already been betrayed once that day. And Noah, staring at the woman, understood that she had gone through a tough day. The two were talking while observing Victril's body sprawled on the ground, and when our protagonist commented on his missions given by his astral map, the witch was a bit confused about how things worked for Noah, who simply smiled and introduced himself, informing her that he had died before falling into that world. Aurelia was suspicious as reincarnations only happened with the permission of gods, in addition to the fact that our hero knew her name. But Noah explained that nothing made sense to him either, and that he felt as lost as she did. Aurelia mentioned that inhabitants from other worlds were rare around there, but she trusted that our young man was not lying. Then, the witch sat in a lotus position and Noah stared at her curiously. After realizing she was meditating, he assumed that the most important thing at the moment would be to get away from there. Aurelia looked back at Noah and was sure that the young man did not belong to that world. With her hands together, she explained that meditation was the most effective way to restore mana, and noticing the young man's weak aura, suggested he do the same. But Noah knew nothing about that, so Aurelia explained that every awakened person had an aura, Noah commented that in his world there were mediocre magicians, and Aurelia found it interesting that someone who didn't understand real magic chose the path of the exsanguinator. Our protagonist liked the idea of being different and asked if it was a problem to break the taboo. But for Aurelia, as long as he didn't become a necromancer, it was all right. And then she told Noah to calm down because it was time for meditation. Noah shut his mouth and the system appeared before him, informing that he had obtained the meditation skill, and therefore, in addition to up, the young man received an amp bar. Our hero decided to explore the blue window in front of him while he recovered. Then he slid his finger over his attributes and discovered the power of obliteration, which was capable of channeling the energies of the void to end everything that crossed his path. Noah stared at his hand while testing a bit of the power, and soon the system warned that he was draining health through the void. The young man expressed a devilish smile, pleased to have acquired the exsanguinator path. When the mana reached 100%, Artu stood up and walked over to Victral's body, which lay on the ground. Aurelia picked up the monk's bracelet, which served as a direct storage device in the magical dimension, and she said they could obtain its contents if they took it to the city. Noah found the item interesting and wondered how it would be to transfer his inventory to an object like the bracelet. Then Aurelia informed him that this type of storage used blood ties and could not be accessed even if the user was dead, unless she found the key, and so she searched every possible hole of the old man. Noah asked to take a look at the bracelet casually, and Aurelia, seeing no problem, tossed it to the young man. He began analyzing the artifact until his inventory detected the storage device and asked if the hero would like to transfer the items to him. Noah confirmed the action and received mana points in addition to filling his inventory with Victral's items. Meanwhile, the witch commented that she needed to find a basement key, and Noah raised a key to show the young woman, who promptly wanted to know where he had gotten it. Noah explained with the bracelet on his wrist that the key was inside the old man's storage and listed several items he found there. Aurelia was surprised by Noah's ability as she saw the key she was looking for float into her hand, and our hero decided to try on one of the clothes from Victral's inventory. Dressing in a cloak that looked more like a beggar's blanket, he then focused on a ring with the Eye of the Abyss, which Noah considered to be cursed. However, Aurelia, who was driving the head monk, said, even with disgust for the artifact, that the ring provided a large amount of mana. So Noah decided to put on the ring, even though he didn't like the way that Eye stared at him, and he realized that one of his abilities was to reveal the levels of the people around him. Now his perception reached another level, and therefore he identified that Aurelia, with her flames, was level 68. Our protagonist took another look at the inventory and smiled as he picked up Victral's daggers, which he judged to be quite light and practical. While Noah was having fun with his toys, the witch conjured a fire spell, and looking at the religious body on the ground, she rhetorically asked if it was the first time Noah had finished off an enemy, and curious, the young man asked how she knew. Without taking her eyes off the enemy, Aurelia replied dryly that she had been working in the role for quite some time, and therefore it was easy to identify a novice. Noah saw the sorceress incinerate Victral and asked why she did that kind of work. And while the flames lit the old man's body, she explained that, among many reasons, the main one was to save people from the evils of the world. Aurelia turned to Noah, who was fiddling with the system, and asked if he regretted having killed someone. But without remorse, he replied that he did not, after all, cry for their mother before mine. Aurelia confessed that if they hadn't taken care of the monks, many innocent lives would have been reaped, especially after a group of adventurers had handed her over to the cult. Noah, who was taking some books out of the inventory, asked if she thought he was a good adventurer, and the sorceress replied that yes, because despite the low rank, the boy did everything right. And so Aurelia listed how the boy handled the situation without losing his cool, in addition to saving her life, leaving Noah grateful for the compliments, especially because he had imagined he would use his RPG skills and job interview tactics to survive in a supernatural world. Then the boy placed two of Victral's books on the ground and inquired how they would be activated, and Aurelia replied that it was done through a magical ritual. The sorceress explained that she would need a magic circle, in addition to using the books as conductors of the ritual, and so she offered to create the circle for Noah. However, when the woman was about to start drawing on the ground, she saw Noah place his hand on the book and the ring on his finger establish a magical connection. Although it wasn't the rustic way to perform a ritual, our hero managed to open and translate the book in the system's AI, which is why people are losing jobs. The book contained the Tome of Vision, which unlocked a skill of the same name. Then Noah stretched out his finger to confirm the use of the skill without hesitation. The system asked which path Noah would like to link the Tome of Vision to, and the boy, although tempted to use it on the exsanguinator, used the skill with the path of the Void Hunter, and thus the sinister ring temporarily increased the class level to 3, enabling on Noah's forehead a mystical eye that shone brightly. And when Noah opened his eyes, he excitedly noticed that his vision was in high definition. Then, gazing at Aurelia, he commented that he could see her mana, but the sorceress explained that, in fact, the protagonist was able to see people's auras. Looking at his own hands, he noticed his own aura flowing intensely, and he decided to take the second book, which contained the Tome of Affliction. The boy laid this time the power with the path of the exsanguinator and saw a red torrent float between him and the book, unlocking the bleed skill. Noah read aloud to Aurelia that this skill allowed him to inflict bleeding on his enemies as well as use it on weapons, and he discovered that he should eat a level F mana stone. Then Aurelia advised him not to ingest anything above that, as he would suffer from mana poisoning. With her hand on her bicep, the sorceress explained that 2 levels above he would become strong for a time, but soon he would feel his body paralyzed and then writhe on the ground like a dizzy worm. Consuming higher levels, the damage was worse, where if he was lucky he would simply explode, but if not, son, get ready to suffer. Noah stared at the stone, attentive to the instructions when the girl informed him that they should leave. The two followed down the corridor, and when Noah asked if they were looking for the exit, Aurelia, who was bandaging her arm, said she was looking for a chamber with magical artifacts. The girl was inclined to find belongings of a person she was assigned to locate, and Noah, curious, wanted to know if there were still living people inside. She then told him that they kept captives in a dungeon where she was the last prisoner. But still, she asked Noah to stay alert as there could still be cultists or monsters around. The two continued down the long corridor, and while Aurelia inspected the rooms around, our hero remained vigilant at the rear, until the sorceress opened one of the doors and asked Noah for the bracelet that functioned as a storage device. Aurelia placed the artifact on her arm and, after igniting it, raised her fist to serve as a lantern. Then she positioned the light so she could read the writings exposed on the wall. Noah, who was able to understand the script due to the vision skill, wondered why people were capable of committing so many atrocities. And Aurelia, who was already hardened by everything she had lived through so far, listed a number of reasons why the soul of man was corrupted, regardless of the world it came from. Noah realized that the sorceress disbelieved in men when she said that all who practiced evil were awakened by their own choices. Aurelia then bent down to illuminate some kind of signal, and identified small stones that flickered in and out of reality like an illusion, and therefore suggested they should jump over them to avoid falling into the trap. Noah, in a reflective tone, asked Aurelia what happened to people who had no choices about the cultists' decisions. Absorbed, the sorceress told him that there was a way for the priestess of Hellion wage a millennia-long battle against the abyss, and the way to remove the influence of evil over people was a not-so-gentle ritual, as it burned the people. Moreover, the punishment for the cultists of the abyss, in extreme cases, could be public execution, and those who survived were never the same again. Indignant, Noah trembled as he asked what happened if it was a child forced to follow the cultists, and Aurelia replied after they left the thorn trap behind that children were sacrificed without pain. Until the sorceress pointed to a door just ahead and, upon approaching, noticed it was sealed by magic, so she decided to use brute force, applying a punch filled with fire that made Noah shield his eyes given the explosion. Then they crossed calmly, and our hero ironically judged that this was the right way to open a door. The room had various books scattered around, and Aurelia deduced that it was a place for the cultists' study. She flipped through the pages of one of the books but commented that there probably wasn't anything interesting there. Then Noah, putting himself in the mind of the cult leader, assumed that if there was something important in the room, it would be elsewhere. So he walked over to a shelf to look for another dusty book that soon triggered our hero's Rinitus. But fortunately, the book had an advanced ability called the Call of the Abyss, capable of summoning creatures from the void. Noah felt tempted to equip himself with the ability but hesitated as his goal there was to find the secret area first. So our young man began to remove the books from the shelf, and Aurelia inquired about the hero's actions, who casually revealed he was replicating what he saw in movies. By luck or fate, he found his secret lock behind the books and pulled the key from his inventory to try to open it. When he turned the key, a new room appeared presenting a large collection of books. The two walked victoriously among the shelves, which also held alchemical artifacts. Aurelia was astonished by Noah's ability to find the place, but for him, it was like recalling the adventure stories he usually read or watched. However, not everything is rosy, and the duo came across a trail of blood that slithered into the dark interior of the chamber. Then, making use of her firepower, the sorceress raised her finger, and suddenly, everything lit up, revealing an extensive corridor flanked by cells while the bloodstain continued its path like marks of an existence still not erased in the place. Noah promptly opened the system, indicating a sinister secret mission that should never be discovered where the blood lurked behind the walls. Noah pointed to the darkness and told Aurelia about the mission, but he found it strange as there was no mention of rewards or difficulty level. The sorcerer stared into the gloom and dryly uttered the word ominous, which logically left our protagonist curious. But Aurelia, cautious instead of giving a direct answer, suggested that the young man not advance this time, and explained that it was a dangerous place, especially for a rank F awakened like Noah. The woman then bent down to touch the blood and supposed that our hero should be on monster hunting missions and not wandering through an abyssal cult temple. Noah, realizing the danger, suggested that Aurelia return with him to the city to recruit more people to help them. But the sorceress knew she could not abandon her fate for those who were trapped with her and for those who pursued her. Aurelia told that everyone had been brutally murdered, and if she did not save them, it would become undead. Noah, who listened attentively, decided that he would follow her at any cost, claiming that he would not let her die in the face of imminent danger. Aurelia blushed at Noah's concern, despite finding him useless for the mission, and the young man, indignant, reminded her that he played an important role in the battle against Victrol. Although the sorceress considered it beginner's luck, she agreed that the novice had an aptitude for magic, something Noah credited to the noble hours spent playing video games. Returning to the mission, Ardu encountered two gates, and Aurelia decided they would take the left path. It was a narrow and winding corridor that Noah found uncomfortable, but Aurelia explained that its defensive architecture delayed enemies, in addition to their walls being forged by mana, which made them difficult to break. They reached another gate, and Noah asked if the sorceress was going to punch that one too. But to his surprise, she gently rang the bell. However, the door was open, and when she swung it wide, they found a room covered in scattered papers with ideograms on the floor. But that was not an ordinary room. It was Victral's secret study center. They began to search the place, and Aurelia was certain that Victral's plans were in those pages, for she knew that the old man was creating a chimera with family members of great regenerative power, but lacking intelligence due to the accumulation of bodies in a single creature. Noah found a report from Victral lamenting the loss of the second prototype due to its affinity with the void and for having acquired some intelligence despite the instability. Noah, as if he could access the old man's memory while reading, saw Aurelia unconscious on the altar and Victral asking the god of the void for someone at least of rank E. Noah, reading the system, understood the reason for the sorceress's sacrifice when she arrived in this world and thus completed the mission Blood Behind the Walls. Then suddenly, a thunderous roar echoed through the room, breaking the concentration and research of our heroes. Desperately, Aurelia shouted, "Run, you fools, weapons will be useless here." But something in her path made Ardu stop. Aurelia crouched down in front of a young injured man who in his last breath uttered, "This saddens the master." Then Noah and Aurelia saw the silhouette of a monster trapped in a cage. And with a little more light, they could identify a bizarre experiment that the system identified as the horror of grafted flesh. Aurelia commented, almost as a layman, that the people composing the structure of that creature were the prisoners who had been incarcerated with her. Ardu sighed in relief when they realized that the monster had not noticed them. But suddenly, one of the bodies trapped in the creature pointed at the heroes upon identifying the master ring, and Noah realized it was Victral's artifact on his finger. The monster, enraged, broke the bars, and Aurelia conjured the most potent flame in her hands, shouting, "You shall not pass." Noah quickly jumped back, identifying the system, the new mission to escape from the creature eager to avenge its master's death. And the monster charged at our hero, who dodged while shouting that they should flee from there. But the chimera repeated that its intent was to kill and avenge. Then it lunged again and lassoed Noah's foot with its tongue. Our hero found himself hanging upside down and quickly activated the blink ability, but due to his position, he couldn't use it as his aura was suppressed. Until Aurelia's fire appeared, literally licking the monster's tongue, which instinctively released Noah. The protagonist executed a ninja roll to distance himself while the creature's eyes fixed on the sorceress. Aurelia became the monster's target, and for a fraction of a second, she noticed that the fire would not be enough to defeat the highly regenerative beast. Suddenly, the monster changed its form into a spiny lizard, emitting a shrill sound. And Noah covered his ears to lessen that deafening noise until the system updated his condition, allowing him to resist the effects. However, the creature shot quills in Aurelia's direction, which she skillfully dodged. And using her fire magic, she advanced as close as she could to launch a fireball at the monstrosity, which felt like a soft jackfruit burned by the flames. The witch approached Noah, asking if he was okay, but our protagonist could barely understand what she said due to the buzzing in his ear. However, the creature was still recovering, and they were almost caught off guard when it took the form of a whirlwind that shot quills in all directions. With that, Aurelia gathered all the power of her mana and with ferocity counterattacked the aberration, projecting herself in a spiral of fire without caring about the consequences. The sorceress crossed through the whirlwind and with the fist that wore the bracelet, struck another blast directly at the creature's body, which fell lifeless as she distanced herself with a double backflip. The bodies accumulated in the monster began to moan as their flesh was toasted, and Noah, watching everything from afar, was paralyzed upon realizing that the souls present there were pleading for help. Aurelia closed her eyes as she concentrated to gather the maximum energy of her mana. Then she raised her arms, conjuring a massive torrent of fire that incinerated the chimera from end to end. Noah realized, incredulous, that the creature was still not dead, and thus maintained his fighting stance. The voices of the chimera's bodies echoed the pain of the burn until suddenly, a small horn began to emerge from the agglomerated flesh, transcending into a massive dragon wing. The creature changed its form again into a horrendous and larger beast with sharp teeth, letting out another deafening scream. The system identified it as the ghostly whale, to which Noah partially resisted the effects. Our hero fell to the ground, dazed, receiving psychic damage from terror that considerably reduced several of his skills and attributes. Meanwhile, the chimera shaped itself into another disgusting being with its power of vicissitude and charged at Noah, who quickly activated the blink ability from the astral wanderer's path and dodged the impact. The beast then attacked Aurelia, who this time could not escape and was lassoed by the enemy's tongue. The chimera suddenly had its attention diverted to the other side and charged at Noah, even with his blink activated. Our hero jumped to dodge and noticed Aurelia unconscious against the wall. The monster turned to the sorceress without finding Noah, then pulled out its daggers from the inventory and plunged them into the back of the aberration. Resisting the attack, the beast swung its tail towards the hero, who activated the blink ability again, hiding in the void. But the system informed that his mana was low, so he consumed the rank F stone, which restored his energy to 100%. Then, with power at full throttle, the young man pierced the creature with continuous strikes from his dagger. Noah jumped away from the beast, which was trying to recover from the multiple attacks. Noticing that his mana had weakened again, he raised his hand to the beast's blood and activated the drain through the blood-sucking path. But the enemy resisted the ability and charged at our hero with all its fury, who jumped again onto the beast's back to deliver new strikes that were resisted. With his mana weakened, Noah stepped back to eat a now rank E stone and had his energy increased by 200%. With the blink activated much more powerfully, Noah also saw his attributes rise considerably. The hero could not miss this opportunity and therefore charged at the beast, unleashing the obliteration power. Noah danced over the beast and, avoiding its jaws, pierced it fiercely again with his daggers. There were so many attacks that his evolution jumped to level 3 of the skills in use. Feeling the power increase, the young man focused and delivered the final blow, certain that this time he would defeat that voracious enemy. But he felt the effect of the rank E stone fade and became desperate, as nothing he did was enough to defeat that creature, which launched its tongue again to wrap Noah like a boa constrictor, immobilizing its prey. Things were going from bad to worse for our protagonist, who still had his partner unconscious, when suddenly, the creature swallowed him without ceremony. But the young man would not give up so easily, and inside the belly of the beast, activated several abilities to recover his energy, and tore the creature from the inside out as if it were a sirloin steak. This time it seemed to work, as the chimera lay sprawled on the ground with its tongue motionless while Noah emerged from its interior exhausted. The faces that made up the monster showed themselves alive, and Noah wiped his face covered in berry juice, and walked slowly towards Aurelia while the system celebrated the victory and evolved our young man's paths. But faced with a battle like this, Noah could not hold on and fell exhausted face first to the ground while receiving the Tome of Vital Force as a reward, and completed the blood absorption of the chimera. When the system completed the progress, Noah moved his trembling hand and gathered all his strength to rise again. Then he executed meditation for mana recovery and obtained the expected result. But suddenly he felt a heart pain and fell again, not understanding what was happening to his body. Our hero was detected with mana poisoning and his HP began to gradually decrease. At that moment, Aurelia asked if the young man was awake, but due to the pain, he replied that he wished he weren't. As our protagonist writhed, the sorceress thanked him, incredulous, for managing to defeat the enemy and, on top of that, save her life again. Aurelia tried to apologize for not being able to help, but realized that the hero felt strange, and recognized the mana poisoning in Noah, but said there wasn't much to be done about it. She explained that although unpleasant, it was not lethal, and raising one of her arms, mentioned that she knew a way to cure him. The two sat in lotus position, and Aurelia asked Noah to release his mana until he was completely empty. Noah followed his friend's advice and began to drain all his mana. The system, performing an x-ray of Noah's heart, informed that his mana was low, leaving his body weaker and weaker, and after a few seconds, all the poisoning had been removed. Noah lay down still dazed, and Aurelia explained that little by little, he would regain his strength, but he would need about 2 days to be back to normal. Noah felt his mouth dry and asked the sorceress for some water or a regeneration potion. She promptly handed a canteen to our hero, who didn't think twice and gulped it all down. Noah, with the book in hand, concluded that he would need many more skills to face the adventures ahead. And so he scanned the Life Force book he received as a reward. A golden light began to envelop the chimera as the system unlocked the new skill for Noah. He felt the same light surround his body while reading that the Vital Force skill would be linked to the blood-draining path. Aurelia sensed from Noah's aura that the skill was a good one, and the protagonist shared that he could now store extra life, giving a boost to his blood when needed. This made the sorceress find it unfair how he dropped that pile of magic. But for our young man, unfair was a world where everything was solved with magic. Noah decided to store the book in his inventory and was notified that he could obtain a fragment of infinite potential. The protagonist also decided to take off the ring with the Eye of the Abyss and commented that he expected more from it in using his abilities. Then the system notified that another unnamed fragment was ready to be consumed, where Noah could unlock a seal. But the protagonist found these system messages about veiled items strange, and Aurelia warned that in some situations it was normal. So Noah touched to confirm, and suddenly a rain of windows appeared informing him that he had modified his genetic code, until he received a new mission for the mysterious fragment where he should find hidden memory parts scattered throughout Arander. Suddenly, our hero began to feel unwell, and the system informed him that he needed to be purified to complete the Devourer transformation. Noah started calling for Rawl while a dark liquid involuntarily poured from his insides, until everything calmed down and he was purified, removing all the magical toxins he had consumed and improving all his attributes. But Noah's expression remained strange, and Aurelia saw the young man collapse unconscious, then wondered where he came from to need such intensive magical detox. After the scare, Noah went to take a shower, trying to piece together how he went from a terrible workday to absorbing blood and pulling things out of nowhere. Noah felt extremely relaxed, and after drying off, he went to check how his attributes were in the system, until he was stunned by the extent of the appeal that the new Devourer status granted him. Curious, he activated the growth attribute and felt his aura getting stronger as he was granted an additional 5 points in all attributes. Aurelia approached the door with a tired look, and Noah asked if she wasn't going to bathe as well. But the girl, all dressed up, informed him that she had already washed, though Noah wasn't smelling any shampoo on her. With her silky hair, she said she had done it while leading him to the room. That's when Noah guessed he must have been unconscious for an hour or two. But for Aurelia, they had already spent too much time there, and so she radiantly suggested that there was another place they really should be. As they left the temple, Noah insisted that Aurelia hadn't taken a bath, so the girl decided to convince him in a more persuasive way. Aurelia mentioned that she didn't really like the cold, but Noah told her that snow brought back good memories from his childhood, and he asked if the girl had ever had ice cream, explaining the recipe to her, but for a fire sorceress, that was a food that didn't fit her menu. The conversation between the duo was relaxed until suddenly they felt the sunlight on their eyes. Aurelia appeared revitalized to see the sky again, but Noah was incredulous to discover that in this world there were 2 suns. Curious, he asked how they differentiated day from night, and Aurelia, with little patience, replied, "Well, when the sun goes away and it gets dark, is that good enough, or do you want me to draw it?" Then she drew that the Earth was not flat, explaining the rotation and translation movement because one thing was certain: when the second sun arrives, it will realign the planet's orbits. I think neither Noah nor we understood much of this whole thing, but the important thing is that the system informed that the mission to escape the temple was complete. Our protagonist noticed something shining, and he asked if Aurelia had found what she was looking for, and the sorceress confirmed by showing a necklace that protected children from evil spirits, even though it had no magic. Noah pondered over the object while she said she found it in the dungeon cells. A new mission appeared on the screen informing that he had found a necklace belonging to someone in the village of Lefar and therefore should return the item. Noah then asked if Aurelia would accompany him on this mission, but suddenly a gust of wind blew through, tussling the sorceress's washed hair. Aurelia confirmed, but suggested they camp as the sun was about to set. Moreover, it was Noah's first mission, and she wanted to prepare him for the occasion. The young man made an ironic bow to his master, but Aurelia, always quite literal, despite her suspicions, didn't catch the rogue's jest. The new day arrived, and Noah was startled when he saw Aurelia, who brought 2 giant armadillos and commented that they would help them cross the forest. However, Noah, apprehensive, wanted to make sure the animals wouldn't eat them, judging them to be somewhat large, and Aurelia, relaxed, mounted the creature, assuring the young man that it was fine and explained that they were gentle and herbivorous, always willing to help humans. Noah didn't seem convinced, but he approached the giant armadillo, gathering his courage. For someone who had defeated a chimera, this shouldn't be a problem, but Noah had no knack for the animal and fell while trying to mount it. And Aurelia had fun with the scene while leading the armadillo deeper into the forest. Since it was time to play, then play right, thought Noah, who quickly activated his blink ability and managed to mount the little beast. The armadillo began to shake, and Noah, still not understanding the reins, ordered the creature to follow the other. It was easy. Aurelia then explained that he should hold on tight, and when he did, the creature took off with the sorceress in pursuit. The animals climbed the tree, and Noah couldn't hold on. Aurelia only saw the young man in free fall activate his blink again and grab onto the first branch that appeared in front of him. But to Noah's luck, the branch broke, and he fell chin first onto another one a bit lower, eliciting laughter from Aurelia. The armadillo, very empathetic, approached our hero and gave him a lick to console him. Aurelia was having fun, and for the first time perhaps in a long time, a genuine smile shaped her face. The two continued their journey, jumping over branches as if they were free spirits of nature. Noah was radiant and commented that he felt like he was flying on dragons again, and Aurelia showed curiosity as she thought that in the hero's world there was no magic. Noah explained that there were many coming from books, movies, and legends, but not that they were real. And he told her that in his world the closest they got to dragons were dinosaurs, but they went extinct millions of years before humanity. Aurelia deduced that the dinos were not like the ancient dragons that destroyed everything in their path, even though they hadn't appeared for centuries, turning them into myths. But for the sorceress, they were myths fabricated by the strong elite of awakened ones who wanted to cover up their cowardly attacks against the population, which to Noah sounded more like an Illuminati-type conspiracy. Noah asked if Aurelia believed in dragons, and for her, having seen the most diverse creatures, they were the kind of monster that overshadowed even the strongest adventurers. They continued their musings about the existence of dragons, and Noah had the feeling that he had experienced that conversation before, but couldn't recall when. Suddenly, Aurelia sped up and said they would soon need to continue on solid ground, and Noah asked how far the village of Lefar was. The sorceress informed that they would arrive in 4 hours and therefore decided to tell a bit more about Arander to the young man. Ardu rode along a road until voices alerted them to the presence of adventurers. Noah and Aurelia seemed surprised by the warm reception the local people gave them, and the young man asked if people usually treated them like this. But the sorceress, with a bland expression, replied that only in small villages. As they followed the main road, our protagonist's ego flared up, and he thought it would be interesting to live a day as a hero. Watching the people applaud his triumphant entrance, they arrived at an inn, and Aurelia asked an employee to take care of the armadillos, offering as a reward a small leather pouch containing mana stones. The boy, who was no fool, decided to check to confirm if they were real and thus led the animals away. But Noah, who found the sorceress generous, learned from her that helping a worker with a tip always pays off in any respectable universe. Aurelia took advantage of the conversation to suggest that Noah remain discreet, and the young man asked if he would have problems. The sorceress replied that for adventurers who travel a lot, probably yes, but for a village on the outskirts, he was as important as a plant. And so she suggested upon entering the inn that if Noah kept to himself, he would raise fewer suspicions about his origin. The innkeeper welcomed our adventurers and asked how long they would like to stay in the village. Then Aurelia replied that it would only be one night while placing 2 mana crystals on the counter. The innkeeper handed over the key indicating the last room on the left on the 2nd floor. Aurelia stretched out her hand with the key to Noah as she had some things to do in the city. But our protagonist wanted to enjoy the stay and learn a bit more about the place full of outsiders who, for the first time, didn't want to kill him. The innkeeper looked astonished at the boy, who tried to apologize with gestures at Aurelia's disapproving gaze. Where did he not understand the part about being discreet? With some intimidating slaps on Noah's chest, the sorceress left, reminding him to be careful or he would see her again. And the innkeeper considered her quite rough as he watched her leave. But for our hero, that was the most interesting part of working with the tough girl. The man offered Noah a drink. Knowing that only idiots or adventurers come from the Lost Forest, he thought it would be the best remedy. And Noah, who was a bit worried since the magical detox, hesitated but decided to accept and wet his throat. Then the innkeeper shouted to the waitress, "Bring a mug for this man." Next, he wanted to know our protagonist's name and commented that he had a baby face. Noah took the mug and, following all of Aurelia's guidelines not to say otherwise, confessed that he had only awakened the day before, and of course the old man was left speechless. However, curious, the man asked while our hero downed the drink what he was doing with a ranky adventurer, warning that it wasn't worth dying to impress her. But Noah sighed contentedly as he felt the liquid in his throat, and he explained to the thick mustache that, in fact, he faced danger when he awakened, being lucky to find Aurelia to help him. The innkeeper extended his hand and introduced himself to Noah, who greeted him cordially. Suddenly, the system informed that Lorien was a warrior miner, but the man explained that he had retired after losing his magic in an accident. Noah, curious, asked what kinds of monsters he had faced, as he didn't know it was possible to lose abilities that way. Lorien recounted that he was on a mission to the north when something emerged from the depths and caught him off guard. He continued that a pearlescent and translucent thing paralyzed his group's movement, where 2 died, 1 lost an eye, and he was left without his mana. Absorbed, the innkeeper said he had never heard of that thing again. The system warned Noah that his blood was becoming poisoned, so upset he suggested drinking something weaker, to which Lorien assumed was the effect of the Constitution skill. Then he commented that the boy could turn off his skill if he wanted, and so Noah did, deactivating the vital blood. Excited, he asked for another round because now he was going to celebrate until he dropped. Lorien, satisfied, explained that if Noah got too cheerful, he could reactivate the skill and sober up quickly, even curing the hangover. Shortly after, Noah let out a hiccup, and the system informed him that he had been poisoned at level 2. Another hiccup, reactivation of the vital blood and clean again. Noah asked the man about the villagers who were lost and if there was a search team. Lorien stared at his mug and lamented the fateful incident. He told that it happened about 6 months ago and 2 adventurers went to look for them, but they did not return, so people gave up. However, only when the mines collapsed did they attempt another search, and once again without success. Lorien continued that they wanted to seal the mines forever, and some villagers protested, as it was the main source of wealth for the village to sustain the harsh winter. Our hero took a mana stone from his inventory and placed it on the table, while Lorien said that there were howls coming from the mines that could be zombies. Noah left the tavern stretching and reflected on Lorien's words about the guild's involvement and a possible evacuation of the village if it were true. Then he decided to explore the place to observe the workings of that peaceful and hardworking society, until he heard 2 villagers discussing the mayor's order to close the mines even with the return of one of the adventurers. Everyone rushed to the town hall, and Noah entered right behind to check what was going on when he saw the mayor arguing with a miner. The dwarf shouted that he wouldn't let the mayor starve the town, and the man politically explained that his intention was to save lives without involving the guild. The mayor turned to the crowd that was gathering and said he was doing his best to ensure everyone's safety. Aurelia watched the speech until she was startled by Noah, who sneaked up quietly, but she whispered to the hero that she was there to find clues with the mayor about the adventurers who betrayed her. Noah suggested they help the people, and Aurelia, impatient, mentioned that was exactly what she was trying to do, what she needed to talk to the man. Noah shrugged and decided to teach the girl how to use her charisma skill. Aurelia was indignant at the audacity of the novice, who was making his way through the crowd, saying they didn't need to argue as everyone wanted the good of the population. And while insisting on a multilateral dialogue, the leader of the miners wanted to know who that insolent boy was, interrupting the conversation. Then Noah, with his insight, showed on his face that he had much to explain about himself. Aurelia watched anxiously as she heard the murmurs around her. Noah bowed and revealed himself to be a newly awakened adventurer who would solve the village's problems. He then calmly explained that they would need someone to go to the mine and come back alive, and he offered to take on the task. The miner leader crossed his arms and, skeptical, asked why the village should send a novice to die. and Noah promptly informed him that he wouldn't go alone, pointing to Aurelia, who, not wanting this exposure, nearly flew at the neck of the boastful protagonist. With no way to escape, the sorceress approached, saying she was a ranky adventurer and had been hired for a mission that could tie into the mine's problem. The mayor recognized Aurelia, recalling her previous group, so she said this matter was part of her mission, but she was willing to assist the village first. Seizing the opportunity, Noah interjected that they would logically need fair compensation. The mayor then showed himself to be cordial, asking what the price for the task would be, and Noah wanted to know if there was a ton of skills in the village. The city leader replied that he had one, but it wouldn't meet the boy's expectations, and thus suggested he go to the city of Windrest, where there was a greater influence in equipment for adventurers. Aurelia commented that it was the city they would go to next, but for the current mission, a level D mana stone and 2 courses would be sufficient. The dwarf leader of the miners said he would join the heroes, as he knew that mine like the back of his hand. Noah shook the mayor's hand for the deal made, and the system soon updated his next mission with medium difficulty. After the agreement, Aurelia asked for the floor from Noah and approached the mayor to take care of her personal matters. In the end, the protagonist was right. The curious dwarf asked Noah where he came from, as in his understanding, he was too old for a newly awakened. Noah told him he came from a world where there was no magic, being the only one who had recently had the chance to awaken a path. And for that reason, the miner asked if he came from the Dead Zone, which were the worlds without mana where the inhabitants drained the life from everything that existed in their devastated lands. Noah said that in his world there were some coexistence problems, but nothing that could be compared to a dead zone. The dwarf then commented that regardless of anything, if the boy indeed solved the mine's problem, he would be doing a great favor for the village. Noah extended his hand to greet the miner, who returned the gesture, promising to meet him the next morning. Aurelia approached with the information that the group they were looking for might be in Windrest, and she had also secured Noah's registration at the Adventurers Guild. Convinced, the fire sorceress wanted to do this quickly, and Noah felt that the girl had a plan. When evening fell, Ardu followed the road to deliver the necklace they had found in the cultist's temple. They arrived at a house, and Noah knocked on the door several times, until an elderly woman opened, hopeful, thinking that a certain Pierce had returned. But her expression changed when Aurelia showed the necklace and asked if it belonged to her. However, the artifact was Pierce's, and with tears in her eyes, the old woman asked if the adventurers had found him as well. But Aurelia, regretful, shook her head negatively, and the lady clutched the necklace against her body in lament. Aurelia comforted the woman, who was trembling profusely, when another young girl appeared at the door. Our heroes were invited in, and sitting in the living room, they saw the daughter comforting her mother over the invaluable loss. The young woman thanked them for returning with the necklace, as she felt it would help them move on, but she warned that they had no money to pay for the service, and Noah asked the family not to worry, as they would continue the search for the mine. Aurelia felt guilty for not being able to do more, and Noah, feeling the sorceress's pain, comforted her with a hand on her shoulders. Ardu, having nothing more to do, said their goodbyes and stood up to leave, and the elderly woman suddenly asked them to wait. She clutched the necklace and sought any information from our heroes about her son's death. Then Aurelia firmly revealed that many people from the villages had been captured by the Abyss cultists, who performed blood rituals, and she recounted that she and her companions nearly died, but if it weren't for Noah saving her, she wouldn't have escaped. But she mentioned that while searching for survivors in the dungeons, they found Pierce's necklace. The elderly woman with a cold gaze asked if our heroes had dealt with the cultists, and Noah coldly replied that he finished them one by one. The old mother recalled that the boy was only 14 years old and had always been very reckless, running through the mines and forests to hunt monsters. She confessed that she had been waiting for this day, as her father was also an adventurer, and although marriage had taken him away from adventures, they had never left him. In front of the man's photo, she said that her son had the same desires as his father, and no matter how much she tried to convince him to reconsider, she knew she would overshadow the true longings of his heart. But the woman wanted to know why adventurers were like that, and both Noah and Aurelia remained silent for a few seconds, until our protagonist spoke that he just wanted to survive in an unknown world and escape his past, but suddenly felt good with all the adrenaline. Noah looked at his hands and revealed that magic was addictive, and that's why he wanted to explore this new world. Pierce's sister then inquired about what Noah meant by a new world, and when he was about to spill the beans that he wasn't from there, Aurelia nudged him to keep it low-key. The elderly woman approached Noah and handed him the necklace, imagining that this would be her son's wish. Then our young man promised to keep it as a treasure, and thus the mission of the lost memory was completed. Our heroes said their goodbyes, and as the day was ending, Aurelia suggested they go to sleep. But Noah commented that he needed to eat, as he wouldn't go hunting monsters on an empty stomach. This made the sorceress smile and reveal that if she didn't know our hero, she would think he had some experience as an adventurer. So they returned to the inn to prepare for the new day in the mines. Near the mine, the dwarf explained that initially, the place would be a dungeon, but something in the chamber formations killed its core, leaving it just a shell. Noah, confused, asked if dungeons could die, and the dwarf explained that if the core was eliminated, it was possible, although he considered it a great foolishness to do so. A domesticated dungeon was the most precious resource one could have, so many kingdoms were founded above these locations. Aurelia speculated that it might be a zombie dungeon as it was a national threat and all guilds should work to eradicate them. But for the dwarf, it was just a typical dungeon of a certain land. They arrived at the entrance and Noah thought he could shorten the path by using his obliteration ability. However, they acted traditionally and got to work with pickaxes. After breaking all the rocks, Noah asked if the dwarf used any ability, but he replied that decades of experience and some skill were enough. As they advanced through the mine, Noah was surprised by the mana stones embedded in the wall, and the dwarf explained that since they hadn't mined for a long time, they had regenerated. Aurelia urged Noah not to lose focus as any danger could arise in that ancient dungeon. So our protagonist quickly pulled out his daggers from his inventory and stayed alert. On the track, the dwarf commented that there could be creatures moving around. Then they reached a massive gate and Aurelia, always vigilant, kept an eye on the rear. The dwarf explained while turning the door's locks that in the past, this was the main section of the mines. And when they entered, they could see several workers lying near their tools. The adventurers stood guard, apprehensive as the paint was still fresh, and suddenly they heard a scream echoing through the underground corridors. The dwarf moved toward the sound while Aurelia and Noah followed, asking him to stop. Noah suddenly used his blink ability, which was noticed by Aurelia as they reached another gate at the end of that chamber. Our protagonist crossed the gate through the void dimension and saw the body of a worker disassembled and trembling on the ground. Noah crouched near the young man to try to comfort him and asked what had done this to him. But the worker seemed to be under the effect of some sinister magic and, as a last gasp, perhaps warned our hero to flee while he still could. Then the young man began to transform into a creature with dark arms from the void. Aurelia screamed as she ran for Noah to get away from the creature. But Noah saw clothes the young man float as his arms multiplied and discovered that he was possessed by the sinister forces of Victrol. The system warned that it was a hard-level mission, yet our protagonist stood firm wielding his daggers. And Aurelia, conjuring her flames, told Jerome the dwarf that he could step away from the fight if he wanted. But staring fixedly at the monster, he could only respond yes. The tentacles were emerging from all parts of the young man, making him increasingly creepy and dark. And suddenly he struck his arms towards Noah without hesitation. Noah activated the blink while dodging, but noticed that the enemy could also inhabit the void. Until suddenly, he felt his scalp burn from the fire Hadouken projected by Aurelia. And when he realized there was only a wisp of what was once the creature left, but a dark liquid dripped close to Noah's face. And suddenly they realized that the creature had dodged and was attacking them from above. The beast advanced mercilessly in its werewolf Medusa form. And Noah, activating his blink again, began to fight it, thinking that if he didn't do something useful, he would be easily destroyed. Aurelia unleashed another burst of fire, but the monster blocked and snarled at the sorceress, flaunting its protruding tongue. The heroine maintained her stance until she saw a rock on a pillar. With her fire magic, she lifted the rock, igniting it until it transformed into a comet, and she shot it towards the enemy with all her strength, which this time felt the blow. Then Noah ran towards the fallen creature, for that was his chance to eliminate it once and for all. He plunged the daggers mercilessly, and his eyes began to turn red due to the blood-draining ability he applied to the creature. But still, the monster tried to retaliate, and Noah had to retreat to avoid being hit. However, our protagonist, while draining the enemy's blood, was inflicted with necrosis poison and began to receive blows from the enemy without being able to protect himself. Then Noah vanished again into the void, and Aurelia waved her arms to draw the monster's attention. But the blood betrayed our hero's position, who, wounded, had his EP reduced to 7%, until he received a little resistance potion, and he returned to the fight, jumping like a frog and cutting the enemy's tentacles with his daggers. Aurelia concentrated her mana and fired another powerful blast at Victrol's servant, who fell once again, and our heroes needed to defeat it before another mutation occurred. The creature was still conscious, and Noah, activating the bleed on his daggers, ran to finish it off. Aurelia, fearful, shouted for him to come back, but it was too late. Our hero brought down his blades, cutting multiple tentacles of the enemy in a single strike. But the beast was tough, and even dazed, it retaliated with its poisoned arms. Then its eyes bulged, followed by an explosion that resulted in a purple and sinister glow. And when something bounced through the mines, the system reported critical damage and stun from the loss of a limb, but the vital blood restored up by 500%. Meanwhile, Noah kissed the ground, falling apart as if he had come out of a movie where being without a hand showed that the Force was with you. He began to tremble, but instead of screaming upset about discovering who his father was, he tried to understand why the vital blood ability wasn't working on his arm. The necrosis poison seemed to have spread throughout his body, and so he shoved the stump of his arm into the system screen, gaining a resistance boost to level 2. Aurelia was doing her best, firing a fireball that now looked like the sun against the monster, but it dodged through its blink as effectively as Noah's. Not giving up, he put the dagger in his mouth and charged at the beast, headbutting it like a mountain goat in mating disputes. And using his hunter's path, he applied the obliteration instantly. Noah's expression looked like a furious animal that bit the tentacles dancing in front of him. Thus, his resistance increased as he attacked the enemy alongside Aurelia tirelessly. The sorceress asked Noah to step back to end the show, and he moved to the side for, as the saying goes, when one doesn't want to, two don't fight. Noah saw the fire lick everything, but noticed that the monster had once again traveled to the void. Then, with a brilliant idea, he asked Aurelia to illuminate the entire area, for the creature could only move through the shadows. The sorceress then raised her hands to concentrate the heaviest flames she could endure, and she saw when Victral's servant crawled looking for a dark place to hide. It was the perfect moment for Noah to stock his dagger in the enemy's shoulder, but it fled again into the void, and when it returned, it was holding Jerome in its tentacles. Our protagonist shouted for the dwarf not to bite the floating arms, and with a quick thought, pulled from the inventory the scroll that was the letter from the god of the void. The enemy stared at Noah, who began to speak in a guttural and dark voice about the artifact in his hands, for he was as bound to it as the monster. Noah's aura had changed as he activated the Born of the Void ability, and when he started to lecture about that commandment of chaos, the Medusa man threw Jerome and attacked Noah, who promptly prepared his dagger and thrust it, this time into his heart. At that moment, the enemy teleported again, with Aurelia indicating that it was his turn to attack and take that filthy fire. Noah found himself engulfed in flames while the weakened monster lay fallen before him. He walked slowly to the dying one, and the young man still alive inside pleaded for the end of his agony. Noah faced the monster and granted the request, draining its blood into a mana stone, thus removing all the poisoning. The young man thanked him and rested, generating several evolutions and rewards for our prota, in addition to acquiring a tome of abyssal summoning Sinister Bro. Noah looked sadly at the worker for having remained alive inside that monster, and Aurelia agreed that it was a tragic fate. The system asked if Noah would like to consume the abyssal creature he had just destroyed. He confirmed on the screen and knelt to absorb the soul and memory of that beast through his Devourer of the Abyss ability. Noah felt a gag after the completion, but nothing like a gentle pat from Aurelia on the back to set him straight again. Our protagonist could feel the painful process that the miner suffered to reach that state, increasing his disgust for Victral and everything the cult propagated to the people of Arander. Noah, filled with hatred, vowed to end all the cultists and thus received a new mission to hunt and destroy them, despite being deemed impossible by the system. Aurelia sensed the heavy atmosphere and approached Noah, suggesting they find a healer for him, and so she led him out of that chamber, supported in her arms. Noah awoke as soft music played and got up, revealing a specter where his hand used to be. He received a warm good morning from Dylan, the most tedious void assistant with his own work, and asked what he was doing in that modern room, but the man insisted he already knew the answer. So our hero didn't have to strain his memory too much to recall the battle, Aurelia, and the severed hand. And Dylan, somewhat relaxed, commented that Noah's world was fascinating, especially for not having magic pouring out of an action movie screen, for, in his view, human nature was more violent than much of what he had experienced. But Noah was more interested in knowing how the guy had managed to access that place. Dylan explained that every record of Noah's astral map was connected to his soul and therefore obtained information about everything he knew. And since he wasn't sure if he would stay there for long, the assistant preferred to absorb as much knowledge as he could. Noah was upset that the man didn't believe in his potential, but despite that, Dylan congratulated our hero for having exceeded survival expectations, which left our protagonist somewhat irritated by the guy's peculiar sarcasm. So, Noah picked up the remote from the floor and abruptly turned off the TV, judging that the assistant was trying to sabotage him. But placing his hand on his head, Dylan replied that he would never do something like that, as it wasn't part of the pact, and in any case, he couldn't wait for Noah's death, even though it was fun to bet on how much the guy would screw up with this whole story. However, Dylan's presence there had a more special purpose, and while Noah observed his spiritual hand, the assistant informed him that Noah could not destroy the abyssal cultists, although our protagonist felt flattered that the guy believed he would be able to do so. But the honest guy in glasses, showing his discontent, stated that he didn't believe it, although his opinion did matter. Noah stared at the man and retorted that if the mission didn't violate the pact, he would execute it. Dylan wanted to know what would make Noah give up on this mission, as the cultists had their usefulness, even if they weren't directly connected to the void. And our hero replied that it wasn't the assistant's problem to care about. Dylan then appealed to the fact that every human had a price, and asked what Noah would like to obtain, trying to convince him that in the world, someone was always crying for another smile. The assistant spoke grimly that, even by killing or trying to protect whoever it was, Noah would never change how the world worked, for he was a mere mortal. Our hero pushed Dylan's hand off his shoulder, questioning why the guy was so afraid he would do it, and he raged that, in his understanding, using the power of the void was not a bad thing, even for Aurelia, since the cultists only cared about their own interests. Dylan replied dryly that this was exactly how humans behaved. But Noah, staring at the agent, made a point to emphasize that not everyone was like that. Then, without an argument, Dylan pointed his finger at our protagonist and judged that he didn't count because he considered him a complete idiot. Noah, indignant, retorted that he was the most important fool in this mess and didn't understand why Dylan wanted to protect those worms so much. And before talking about reconsidering his position, our hero wanted explanations for why the Abyss cultists were so important. The assistant took a deep breath and said that Noah had encountered the astral realm of the void where all his mana was born, but that was not the only place where its creatures resided. Dylan explained that part of the void existed in the physical realm called the Abyss, which was the source of power for the abyssal cultists. And in this abyss, the power of the void spread through the reality that continuously consumed it, allowing the creatures of this astral realm to reach the physical realm. Dylan revealed that the void provided strength to the cultists as they expanded the abyss in the physical realm. Noah accused the void of giving power to anyone who asked without caring about the consequences, but for Dylan, what mortals did with the power did not interest him. Indignant, our protagonist insisted on putting it on the table that only the expansion of the abyss mattered and shouted for answers about this purpose. However, Dylan, standing firm in his convictions, reported that the void simply consumed everything it could, as that was its function in the world. A table flew, shattering the TV, but the assistant merely stared at Noah as if he knew he wasn't ready to understand his point of view. Noah gasped in anger at the suffering that people, even children, faced because of the cultists. But Dylan commented that the hero had already taken his revenge for those he didn't even know, and therefore there was no reason to continue down this path. Keeping calm, the assistant picked up the remote and insisted on knowing what it would take for Noah to reconsider. But in front of the cracked screen, just as the pact was sustained, our protagonist warned that nothing would make him change his mind. Then he turned to leave that room and promised that he would avenge those who were unjustly sacrificed by the cultists, no matter how long it took to do so. For the fate of the abyssal creatures was also linked to his through the void, and thus he had the authority to alter their oath if he wished. Noah placed his hand on the doorknob and reminded Dylan that the pact born of the void granted him this position. Then he launched himself into the astral space with the intent to change the fate of those who did not wish to remain slaves of the abyss for the rest of their lives. This was his new mission. Dylan did not oppose him, but he knew the young man was treading on a minefield, for if the gods discovered his intentions, they would unleash their wrath upon Noah Brown. Our protagonist's eyes opened again, and this time he inhabited his physical body on a bed, and indeed, his left hand was no longer there. Aurelia opened the door with a hopeful expression upon seeing him awake, and she commented that, according to the healer, he would be fine in a week, which was good for Noah, despite the stub. Aurelia let out a roar and revealed that he could have his hand restored for a fair price or even as his level increased. But the young man took a glass of water and thought he should have more options on how to get his dear little hand back and asked if there was a library nearby. The sorceress replied that perhaps the village had one, and Noah explained that he could work on some things there to use to his advantage. Aurelia agreed as long as the young man did not use any nefarious power, but Noah, quite ironically, could not promise the sorceress, since his power came from evil roots. This was a hook for the sorceress, who crossed her arms and asked the hero if there was anything she needed to know about the nature of his abilities. Aurelia made it clear that she was grateful to Noah for saving her twice, and that his conduct did not raise any questions. But the young man saw her say that she could no longer cover for him, as things had gone well so far. Then she said she felt 3 different manas in Noah's aura, as he did not have enough control to hide them. But it was not something difficult to guess from his abilities. And even if it didn't sound strange in that world, the witch assumed that the 3 paths of our guy were quite powerful. Aurelia remembered Noah in action and mentioned that someone without experience didn't fight as well as he did, especially after appearing in an abyssal cult and demonstrating control with void abilities. The witch recognized that Noah never backed down from battle or showed fear. Our protagonist replied that he had always practiced martial arts in school and that should count for something. And looking at his half-arm, he revealed that he was never quite sure about his abilities. He just tried to survive in a strange place where people wanted to kill him. Aurelia nodded her head and suddenly pointed at Noah, saying that she trusted him and therefore would show him something she didn't share with most people. Aurelia then enveloped Noah in her fiery mana and asked if the boy also trusted her or if she would be forced to do something she didn't really like. The witch revealed that she needed to be sure that the boy could travel with her. Then she took a ring off her finger, explaining that the artifact allowed her to let him follow together, and thus asked Noah to inspect it. But our boy, unfortunately, couldn't see anything through that object, and Aurelia insisted that he try once more. Noah discovered that the ring was forged from the frozen tears of the ancestral dragon, capable of healing its bearer and teleporting them to a safe place just once. Relieved, Aurelia revealed that the group she was betrayed by didn't know about this condition, so Noah assumed that he had passed the test. The witch replied that yes, but she was worried about our protagonist having such intimacy with the void, in addition to the sinister scroll he had used twice, and she even wondered if perhaps he was hiding something about his nature, but Noah asserted that he had been honest all along. However, Aurelia confessed that she still had her doubts about the boy, who suggested to her to use her lie detector whenever she needed, even though she didn't have one. Noah handed a mana stone to the witch and asked her to press it against her chest, so she could know the nature of her mana. At that moment, a dark aura enveloped Noah as he said that the memories of his death seemed to have been erased. But he could tell Aurelia that he awakened in the void and for that reason received the paths and the scroll, even without intending to harm innocents. Aurelia asked Noah to swear standing that he was not lying, and when he repeated the words of the oath, a new mission screen appeared informing that he was now a man of his word. Noah felt a golden light rise above him, and soon after, Aurelia noticed that the stone had not broken, thus allowing her to fully trust the words of our honest boy. Noah was surprised by how the scheme of breaking the stone in a lie worked, and Aurelia told him that some aura masters could hide their nature, but it was difficult. Our boy felt much more relieved, so he decided to do something useful like changing the bandage, making the bed, and then he went for a carefree stroll around the village, until he arrived at the library and picked out some books that talked about how to restore arms. The idea of a mechanical arm stirred in his mind, so he studied a pretty crazy formula with void parasites and other nefarious things for the reconstruction of his arm. Upon closing the book, he realized that the process didn't explain whether he should use the parasite directly on his body, so he grabbed another book to learn more about the creatures he would be dealing with. Noah discovered that the parasites used the life force of the host to survive and to capture it. They needed to devour it. This ability was not a problem for him. After studying, Noah verified that he had the books for the reconstruction, as well as the necessary skills that granted him life force, so he decided to start the work. He left the library with the book under his arm and found Aurelia in a basement to begin the process. The boy placed the book, advanced on the abyss into the system, and gained level 25 experience on the subject. Then he took a mana crystal and drew a symbol on the ground. He even felt proud of his art while Aurelia observed the scribble, somewhat startled. Noah positioned himself in the center of that circular mandala and opened another book while the void was invoked. The system also consumed the information from the abyssal tome, and the pages began to float around our protagonist, initiating the ritual. Moments before, in the void, the parasites floated in peace until a larger worm appeared and began to eat the little ones, poor things. A voice echoed in that astral space, invoking the creatures to bind themselves to that body as an offering. The creatures soon became excited and rushed towards the call, just like spermatozoids seeking to fertilize the egg. The mandala manifested in the space where various beings were drawn, but one of the worms cut in line without ceremony, following its nature. There was an astral battle among the abyssal beings, but the little worm managed to slip away from the jaws and enter the portal between worlds. On its path, some phrases of kindness were imprinted in its consciousness, but the main one was that the creature should always obey its master. Then there was the manifestation in the physical world before the eyes of Noah and Aurelia, who observed the process. The creature rose and heard the first command from its master. The worm crawled towards Noah, aware that if it did not obey him, it would return to the darkness. And as it approached, our protagonist saw a new arm materialize where the stump of millions had been, aiming the new pet Tony, until the limb fixed itself to Noah's body, causing a bit of pain with the implant. The system informed that the hero had been hit by an abyssal parasite, contracting 1 point of fever. Aurelia desperately activated the flames in her hand and asked Noah to cancel the ritual, but our boy warned that he was fine while trying to control that new force over his physical body. Suddenly, Noah fell, feeling pain, and upon facing his new friend, revealed that his body was burning. Then he received an ability that allowed him to tolerate pain. However, the heat was so unbearable that he instinctively lifted his shirt. His arm began to merge with that dark energy, and his fever evolved to 2 points. Aurelia approached the boy, who looked more like a shrimp, and Noah explained that the parasite was feeding on his life force to heal his arm. Once again, his arm began to hurt intensely, and Noah deduced that he needed healing potions. Noah fell again and soon gained another evolution in his pain tolerance. Then he began to meditate to take control of the situation, which ensured another evolution in his tolerance. Noah behaved like a guru, breathing deeply to concentrate his strength in the symbiosis with the least pain possible, until everything calmed down and he could contemplate Tony his new arm without any illness, but he found it strange as he could not dominate the darkened limb. The fever was removed, and Aurelia handed the healing potion to the boy. He thanked her and drank the liquid while the sorceress asked if he felt better. Noah said he had no more pain and realized that Tony had not yet fully attached, so he decided not to move his arm for now. The clawed hand still emitted some remnants of the void's aura, and Noah contemplated his new weapon with strong muscles, claws, and even venomous glands in addition to cute eyes. The parasitic limb had reached level 6, and Noah was now a symbiotic human, so the system increased 2 points in all the boy's attributes. He admired his new arm while the system updated the information, and Aurelia confessed that she initially did not believe in the success of the process. Our hero said that was one of the reasons he had researched a lot, but everything turned out better than expected. Noah felt renewed and excited like a child who just got 5 pounds. But Aurelia thought the boy should hide it to avoid curious looks, as it was not normal for adventurers to take parts of monsters to restore their limbs. Although Noah found it formidable, Aurelia did not completely approve of the aesthetics of the new arm. Then Tony's eye suddenly appeared in the palm of Noah's hand, who confessed he needed to learn to control his little friend. Aurelia, curious, asked if she could pet it, and Noah replied that the pet did not bite. The sorceress began to poke Tony, who soon trembled and hid like a scared dog. She conceded that a weapon like Tony could be interesting, although the great challenge for the Awakened was to acquire equipment compatible with their level. But she confidently assumed that if the arm had a connection with the boy's astral map, it would also evolve gradually. Noah was eager to test his new toy, and Aurelia suggested they go far from the village to avoid destroying anything. They then left the city for the nearby forest, and Noah stopped in front of a huge tree. Our hero activated Tony's sinister aura and attacked the trunk several times with ferocity, which began to express a makeup resemblance. And as if that weren't enough, he also added a bit of the poison that soon seeped into the trunk, marred by the blows dealt. Noah stared madly at his target with a look never seen before. Aurelia shouted, professing that Noah needed to learn to use the claws and that his movements were flawed with his left hand. However, the protagonist was relaxed and thought that Tony could help him improve his moves, as it was just an adaptation period. Noah was so silly with his toy that he couldn't stop laughing just by looking at it, and Aurelia couldn't understand how someone could be so happy using a void monster claw instead of a hand. But for Noah, it wasn't about magic, and he thought it was pretty cool that many rich people would pay a good amount to have an arm like that. Aurelia crossed her arms, not understanding the meaning of cool, so our protagonist explained various ways the sorceress could use and abuse the term in a sentence. However, Aurelia insisted that Noah's world was quite strange, but the boy commented that where there were dragons was right there, come on. And trying to continue the argument about the strangeness of a winged being breathing fire, Noah came across a huge rock. Aurelia leaned against a tree defending her point of view, without noticing that our hero activated his claws and ran towards the rock to play again with Tony. However, despite the damage caused to the stone, the boy realized that he still had some bones running through his arm. Then his obliteration was activated, and Noah noticed that the void energy seemed to react more intensely in his left arm, so he should use it with caution. Noah focused and attacked the rock again, and he jumped all happy when he saw the damage he had done this time. Aurelia, already somewhat fed up with that game, suggested they leave before they noticed the boy's disappearance. On the way, Noah couldn't wipe the silly smile off his face, and the girl, out of patience, asked what was so funny. The boy made a little joke about hands, which for Aurelia was the last straw. Then suddenly, the woman shot a burst of fire at him to make him pay attention. But Noah was clever and activated his void camouflage to escape the blow, and he ran off enjoying the situation, while the sorceress shouted that she would catch him around the corner. In the tavern, Lorien and Noah were talking about the new arm, and the boy wanted to know what people were gossiping about the subject, but the tavern keeper suggested he not pay them any mind. However, Noah's ego was so inflated that he, smiling, commented that he liked the damage. He recounted that while taking a stroll, he heard the wildest assumptions from the villagers about how he got that beauty. Then, taking advantage of the mood, he gave the people a little scare to confirm their expectations, eliciting good laughs in that relaxed chat between the old man and the boy. Lorien asked how long Noah planned to stay in the village, and the protagonist replied that about 2 days until Aurelia organized the logistics. The man commented that he found it strange for the woman to be in charge, while Noah took a sip from his mug, knowing he couldn't turn off his life force because of Tony. But after refreshing his throat, he justified that it was better to have Aurelia in control than to end up getting lost and dying out there. Noah showed a list to Lorien and asked if he could help him with the items, but the man, indignant upon reading the content, asked if the protagonist wanted to summon a demon. However, he felt relieved when the boy explained that it was just for new skills, and he handed a mana stone to Lorien to get the items as soon as possible. The tavern keeper shook his head negatively, and Noah gave him more stones, promising him more by the end of the day. And so he left the inn with empty pockets but a smile on his face. Later, a boy brought the cart to our protagonist, and he said that his boss hadn't found all the items, but everything was listed nicely. Noah came down the basement stairs with his trinkets while Aurelia stared at him, still angry about the pile he put on her in the morning. The boy asked for a little help, but the sorceress pretended it wasn't her problem, and Noah found it funny how she tried to punish him. Aurelia saw a bunch of things on the shelves and asked what the boy was going to do with those things. And Noah, pleased by her interest, told her he was going to do some tests with his abilities, noting that no bunnies were harmed during the recordings. Noah opened his inventory and asked Aurelia to watch from the sidelines, but the little bunny didn't seem very confident with the somewhat crazy expression of our fighter-turned-alchemist. Noah grabbed a jar with black stones and threw one into the air, but when he caught it back, he automatically entered the void dimension, which even surprised the carrot eater. And when he returned next to Aurelia, he discovered that he could teleport objects, but Noah was ambitious and wondered how much more he could take to the other side. Noah continued his tests, now with his hands full of stones, trying to transport them to the void. He announced the start, but he noticed something strange about his body during the trip, and upon returning, he mentioned that he felt an inexplicable tension while Aurelia read a book relaxed. Our protagonist opened the system and deposited some of the stones into the inventory, as he realized that traveling with them in hand made it harder to use the ability. He tested it again, and upon returning from the blink, commented happily that it was possible to travel with items when they were in his inventory. Then he picked up an iron bar and prepared for the next test. He activated the blink and dropped the bar to return balancing on it. Noah traveled again to the other dimension and practiced surfing on the bar, perhaps to test his balance. Noah sat in a lotus position and tried a new way to balance the bar while inhabiting the other side, and he found it interesting to notice that even in the void, the bar continued to float in the physical world. He traveled once more and concluded that he could only perform the teleportation when holding the object. Then, out of nowhere, he started tossing the trinkets that were in the inventory, until he held a small box while whistling casually. Noah filled the box with stones. He took off his shoe and activated the blink, balancing the box with his foot, but it remained in the physical world. Then he explained to Aurelia that he could only take objects with him that he was holding. Noah placed his hand on the wall to demonstrate practically that if he intended to teleport an entire house, for example, it would be impossible, which made perfect sense to Aurelia, as it was necessary for Noah to channel his mana to the object in order to pull it. He thus presumed that it might be some kind of restriction built into the astral universe. While Aurelia said there could be other powers without such a restriction, Noah exchanged glances with the frightened little bunny and decided it was time to use it in his tests. So he removed the little creature from the cage, ensuring that nothing bad would happen to it. Noah held the animal in his arms and activated the teleport. Under Aurelia's curious gaze, who witnessed the young man's ability to take living things with him, Excited by the discovery, our protagonist prepared for the next experiment with a jar full of worms. But unlike the rabbit, these little creatures showed so much resistance in their physical mass that Noah returned exhausted, needing to meditate to recover his mana. As a final test, our young man invited Aurelia for a little trip to the other side, and the woman, without objections, closed the book and replied, "Let's go." Noah touched Aurelia's shoulder and activated his ability, but deduced that the system wasn't considering that he was holding her. So he took the sorceress's hands, but felt something strange around him. There was a flash, and the system indicated low mana from our protagonist, even though his ability had evolved to level 5. But when they returned to the physical world, Noah fell to one side and Aurelia tumbled to the other, feeling horrible. Noah got out completely exhausted, but was satisfied to know that he could teleport with Aurelia in difficult situations. And the sorceress confessed that she didn't know if doing it again was better than dying, as she felt like her brain had split in two. Then suddenly, Noah regurgitated and quickly recovered. Our protagonist began to piece together the lessons he had learned from his tests and decided to continue the experiments. He opened the inventory to deposit the stones from the jar one by one, but he noticed that the inventory was consuming his mana. Noah didn't give the little bunny a break either, as in the name of science, he tossed the pet into the inventory as well. Then he let some time pass with Aurelia by his side, always engrossed in her readings. After a few minutes, he took out the rabbit and assumed that there was oxygen in the inventory, or that the little creature managed to freeze time while it was there. However, even more presumptuous, Noah asked if Aurelia wanted to take the test by entering his inventory too. Aurelia showed indignation at the request, but Noah assured her that the rabbit returned unharmed. However, the sorceress remained unyielding, even with our hero's insistence. Noah tried once more, promising that he wouldn't leave her there for long, and the woman, starting to get furious, made our protagonist give up on the idea, but he at least wanted to know the reason for her refusal. Aurelia then confessed that it must be very dark in there, making Noah conclude that the woman was afraid of the dark and for that reason mastered the power of fire. The young man completely understood the cat's reasons and justified that the request was only because he imagined that time stopped inside the inventory. Then, in a nonchalant manner, Noah tried once more, claiming that if one day the woman got hurt, he could save her by keeping her well protected. And he mentioned that it was a matter of life or death, since she herself was no longer willing to take foolish risks, and he needed to understand how her powers worked. The speech was so convincing that Aurelia decided to accept the challenge, but on the condition that she would pull him back instantly. Otherwise, the boy would experience the true strength of her fist. Noah put away the bunny and grabbed Aurelia by the arm, saying, "Fire Witch, I choose you." But the system rejected the woman's entry, claiming that the inventory capacity had been exceeded, and Noah fell to the ground in disbelief, as this simple movement with Aurelia drained almost all his mana. However, he realized that even without capacity, the inventory was activated, so he deduced that it would be possible to store her inside when needed. But Aurelia, sneaking away, commented that she hoped it wouldn't come to that, and she decided to return to studying the manuscripts when Noah had an idea for a new test. The hero wanted to know how quickly his obliteration ability could consume those little stones, and he noticed that the hand where Tony was executed the function much faster than the normal hand. Noah began to transfer the energy of the void to a little stone and threw it against the ground, causing a huge hole in the floor. The boy went to check the damage and wondered why his abilities didn't have a fixed cost, and Aurelia explained that there was a minimum cost for activation that could be bypassed by a partial activation. Noah understood the narrative while pulling the rabbit out of the hat, or rather from the inventory, and staring at the fluffy creature, he was sure that time stopped inside his inventory. Then he released the little animal, which bounced and jumped into Aurelia's lap. The sorceress couldn't resist and petted the bunny, saying that animals sense kindness. Noah, for his part, pointed a dagger at the creature and asked if Aurelia could hold it tightly, as he would need to hurt it a little. "It's all staged, okay, folks." And the girl promptly grabbed the pet with her look of, "Touch him and I'll skin you, clumsy boy." With that, the protagonist once again tried to explain that he needed to be sure if his blood had healing power, but if it didn't work, the woman could just give the little creature a potion. The sorceress agreed to the test, and Noah promised the fluffy one that it would be a quick pain. Then he made a cut on the rabbit's leg, which became a bit dizzy in Aurelia's lap. Quickly, Noah made a cut on Tony's hand and poured his blood over the animal's wound, which to everyone's surprise worked family. Noah stared at his hand with some disbelief, and the pet jumped from Aurelia's lap to lick Tony's red milk. Aurelia, always cautious, warned that Noah shouldn't tell anyone about this ability, but the boy, distracted by the bunny, asked why. The sorceress warned that now he was a walking healing potion, so if he didn't want to be imprisoned to serve as a health machine, it was better to keep quiet. Then, upset, our favorite healer said he would stay quiet while the bunny begged for a little more red milk. However, Aurelia cut the fun short and warned that it was time for him to get out of there, and she released the pet into the forest, which was quite indignant at the rejection after so much collaboration for the sake of science. The little creature stayed there eating grass, but that food was no longer fun, so it was consumed by the desire for red milk, and it hopped away in search, for it understood that the giants had much to offer him. The rabbit continued its search until it found an innocent little girl playing with flowers. It approached, and the girl was happy to notice the little white creature. The animal rubbed against the child's leg, who promptly picked a leaf to return the favor. The bunny ate the little leaf, and thus they established that cute relationship sitting in the middle of the forest. But while being petted by the little girl, the force inside him craved more of the juice that birds don't drink. The rabbit climbed up the girl's legs begging, so she picked him up thinking he wanted to be warm. Then she started to pet his nose, which even made the little creature sneeze. The girl decided to take the rabbit home with her, and he was astonished by the number of giants to feed from. She opened the door happily, announcing her return. But the mother, when she saw the creature in her lap, asked what that was. A bunny, of course, she replied, and told that she found it in the forest, wanting to keep it. The woman put her hand on her head, already presuming she was going to have trouble, and the rabbit just wanted to drink its juice of malice. As there was no agreement, the mother asked the girl to take him back to the forest, but she insisted on keeping him, showing how cute he was. Then the woman took the creature from the child's hands and decided to put it outside. The girl followed her mother grumbling, but the woman continued without a word. The rabbit heard the door close behind him, and once again was rejected by those who could feed him. Indeed, society shapes the individual. Not giving up, the pet returned to the house door and earnestly asked for his strawberry milkshake. Then he cried alone and abandoned, feeling deceived once more. Oh, cruel life. Nevertheless, the rabbit hopped away in search of another giant who would treat him better. The creature reached the middle of the city until he spotted a bald man and approached him. As he was so cute, the man promptly picked the creature up, and the mustache man beside him commented that he had seen him with the little girl not long ago. The bald man remarked that rabbits had very tasty meat and thought that perhaps he could cook him. But noticing the danger around him, the animal quickly defended himself and bit the hungry man's finger, who screamed while serving milk to the little creature. Not far from there, Aurelia returned to the experiment room and saw Noah fiddling with the system notification settings so they wouldn't distract him during battles. But the sorceress commented that she did like most adventurers, keeping all information in one place. Then Noah drew an email box in the system and dragged all notifications into a single folder. The protagonist decided to study the attributes, for although the names were quite intuitive, he didn't understand how they really worked. Noah tried to concentrate to find answers to his questions, and he felt as if his brain was frying, until the system rewarded him and the young man acquired a new skill to modify the soul, along with sub-attributes that left Noah even more confused, and Aurelia reminded him that the guild evaluated them when registering. Noah continued to be bothered by the lack of information and decided to tap on the screen regarding the strength attribute. A discomfort in Noah's neck took over, preventing him from focusing on his studies, and all those symbols in front of him, which composed human anatomy for magical development, made him so dizzy that he ended up fainting. The rabbit jumped from the bald man's hand and ran off with his mouth all smeared. But he thought that juice was spoiled as it wasn't as tasty and full of carbohydrates as the previous one. The pet was outraged as he wouldn't accept beating without his original drink. And suddenly, a predatory instinct took over him, deciding to hunt animals with fur just like a wolf or wild boar would. He went into the forest to begin his hunt, until he saw a squirrel doing the sun salutation, and he ran after it, filled with bad intentions. The squirrel, running freely, found it strange that the rabbit was on his tail and decided to speed up. But the rabbit didn't give up, so the squirrel dodged and climbed the trunk of a tree. Upset, the rabbit turned around and decided to try with something bigger and suddenly spotted a pig eating apples. And with his red eyes and white fur, he charged at the swine, sinking his teeth into its hind leg with skin and all. The pig grunted in pain and kicked the pet, who tumbled 1,000 times as he wasn't strong. Then he came out all hurt, but soon his wound healed by itself. He felt better and spotted another rabbit eating leaves in peace. His eyes sparkled, and he thought he would have a good chance there, as the brother wouldn't see him as a threat. He approached, and the two began to sniff each other in that natural recognition ritual, until the cute brown one cordially said goodbye. But our pet felt the instinct take over again and jumped against the harmless one without ceremony. After the feast, his expression remained unsatisfied, and therefore he attacked the little brother again with the intent to consume him, which granted the rabbit a cannibalism status and a few more evolutions. However, as the system was relentless, it gave him the possibility to become a killer rabbit. Back to our heroes, Noah visited Aurelia's room. The woman apologized for the mess of papers scattered on the table. Noah analyzed the content and deduced that the woman was more committed than he had imagined, and Aurelia justified that she had more than one goal in mind. For she was charting their path to Windrus, but needed to retrace the steps of the traitorous group before they could proceed safely. Noah understood Aurelia's purposes and seized the opportunity to ask for information about everything she knew regarding the sub-attributes. And the sorceress, understanding that he intended to become a true adventurer, said, "Stick here, Daddy, and I'll explain everything to you." Noah sat down gladly while the woman grabbed a sheet of paper. Aurelia started to draw, and Noah thought the doodle looked more like a rotten apple. But what mattered was the intention. Then the sorceress explained that the little figure was our protagonist, and the circle around it represented his soul. That it was as large as the body and represented the individual's aura. And the more he trained, the more space he would open in his soul for the 4 sub-attributes of each attribute. Aurelia gave the example that even a rank D with a high-strength attribute could be weaker than someone with all 4 sub-attributes enabled for their own strength. But she suggested that Noah not worry too much about that yet, as he had much to learn about the new world. Aurelia mentioned that she would talk about sub-attributes when the guild evaluated him, and the hero felt a bit pressured, asking what the need for such an evaluation was. Aurelia emphasized that it was of utmost importance, but she didn't go into details, as it was time to leave. An hour later, our adventurers left the village amidst the mayor's thanks, who granted them 2 horses. And he smilingly said that the village doors would always be open for both of them. Aurelia thanked him and they continued down the road, bidding farewell to the townsfolk for their new mission in the City of Winds. The 2 suns were blazing and Noah could hardly endure the riding. The protagonist suggested they take a break, but Aurelia said they should keep going, as time was short. Noah complained that the day had suddenly turned hot, and Aurelia explained that the suns got closer every 15 days, demonstrating that it was her favorite climate, while our protagonist wished that among his powers, he had one that could cool him down. Aurelia commented that the boy could gain heat resistance with constitution, but at the moment Noah just wished Windrest had a more pleasant temperature, because the climate of that world changed abruptly, and she gave the example that they had just been in a forest full of trees, and were now almost in the Sahara Desert. Aurelia explained that the environment was related to the strongest mana of the place, which is why the climate there was drier. Noah shielded himself from the sun while the sorceress explained that Windrest already had more of the strength of air, and the boy wished they would find fewer places rich in solar mana stones, a comment that drew hearty laughter from Aurelia. The woman warned our novice to stay well hydrated, and said they would soon take a break for the hot one to cool off. Noah, already melting, grabbed his canteen and gulped down some water, when Aurelia suddenly spotted something in the distance. But Noah, due to the sunstroke, couldn't identify it and heard the sorceress say they should go faster. The 2 then galloped swiftly towards a man driving a carriage. It passed by the coachman casually, who greeted them cordially, and asked with a smile if the guild had sent people. Noah and Aurelia exchanged glances, and the sorceress replied that they were just 2 adventurers on their way to Windrest and wanted to know if there was any problem there. The coachman said that a landslide in the valley had blocked the way, and he didn't know how long it would take to send a geomancer to resolve the issue. The heroes moved ahead to the large rock blocking the road, and upon confirming the path on the map, Aurelia suggested another riskier route. Seriously, the sorceress said she didn't want to sleep in the forest, so she decided they would travel through the night, but Noah thought the decision was somewhat insane. The coachman was astonished that they chose the Serpent's Grove, and Noah wanted to know what the problem with the place was besides the intimidating name. In a grim tone, the man revealed that there were rumors of a worm in the area, and even though our 2 were adventurers, he tried to discourage them from taking such a path. But for Aurelia, it was nothing but nonsense, as she detected no mana in the area, not even for a wyvern, let alone a worm, until they saw a couple with a faint child in the grove, and the man waved hopefully at our adventurers. Aurelia avoided eye contact, but Noah couldn't ignore the guy whom the system identified as a sculptor pleading for help to cross the Serpent's Grove. Noah heard the man say that his son was very ill and they needed to get to Windrest as quickly as possible, even promising to reward the heroes. Noah asked if the father was a sculptor, and the man confirmed, introducing himself as Leon and telling that he worked for the mayor of Altius. Our heroes approached the family, and when asked about the boy's illness, the father said that only a rank C healer or higher could save him. Noah crouched down in front of the boy to check and noticed that he was burning with fever. Then Aurelia, already imagining what was going through our protagonist's mind, called him to talk privately. They moved away, and Noah asked why the witch only wanted to leave them behind. However, Aurelia replied that Leifar was closer, and Noah retorted, as the boy needed a rank C healer. He suggested using healing through his blood, but Aurelia definitely refuted the possibility, reminding him of the consequences. Then the young man decided they would take the family to Windrest, and Liam thanked them immensely as the system updated the mission tab for our hero, considering it difficult with an unknown reward. The man informed his wife that they would continue their journey, but before Noah called them, and handed a tube with a red liquid to give to the boy. For following Aurelia's advice, our young man cut himself gently to not reveal Tony's properties, so in the little jar it stays relaxed without drawing attention. Shia, who was the mother, showed the medicine to the boy, warning they would help him with the fever. But the boy looked at the tube with disgust. Then Noah told him he would take his parents to the big city to heal him, and the little medicine would make him feel better. Arios, the boy, hesitated for a moment but drank the wicked juice all at once. Then Aurelia, who was already on the horse's back, spoke dryly that they should leave soon, as the journey was long. The road through the forest continued with freshness, and Aurelia, who was carrying the woman with the child, said that the path would have an exit to the right, bringing them face to face with Windrest, and if they continued to travel through the night, they could arrive at dawn. Noah made no objections and continued to ride, taking the boy's father with him, and he commented that he did not know Altius mentioned earlier, but Leon explained that it was a city to the west, near the Lost Forest. Our protagonist wanted to know a bit more about the man's profession as a sculptor, who promptly took a teddy bear out of his bag and said it was his specialty. Noah was astonished by the doll dancing in the man's palm, while he explained that the mayor had hired him to make watchtowers for the city. Curious, our young man wanted to know how the teddy bear moved on its own, and Leon explained that it was a skill he had to command the sculptures. On the other side, Aurelia was talking to Shia that rank C healers were not very common, and therefore their services tended to be expensive. Then the woman told that they had sent letters to a group that had a rank C healer and decided to help them. Worried, Aurelia asked if the group was called Iron Fists, but the woman replied that it was something like the Just Light. Liam thanked for having found someone, as Arios had been ill for over a week and they no longer knew what to do. And with trembling hands, the man commented that many children were falling ill under rumors of a curse or plague. Noah was outraged, and Leon said that the elders had also been affected. Shia told that besides being a seamstress, she performed births, and in the last month, all the children had been born weak, and the population no longer knew what to do. Leon, outraged, also commented that there had been more movements from the Abyss cultists, as if the Church of these demons was sending more priests than usual. At that moment, Noah and Aurelia listened attentively, as they knew what the man was talking about. Shia said that her wish was to go to another place after Arios got better, but Liam reminded her that they could not leave the city after all the mayor had done for them. Time passed, and suddenly the sun was blocked by an unusual darkness. Then Noah looked at the sky and prepared to use the eyes of the Void Hunter, while Aurelia promptly activated the flames in one of her hands, hoping it wouldn't be what she imagined. A voice echoed among the trees, leaving our travelers perplexed. Then the witch urged them to leave quickly, and so they rode with all the speed they could. But Noah, curious, looked back and saw a creature that the system recognized as a zombie bear. They continued to flee until the horses suddenly stopped. Noah asked if it was normal to darken like that, and Aurelia replied that something was wrong. She dismounted from the horse and looked up, apprehensive. Then she jumped to the high branches and shouted that they should leave immediately, while Noah, with the hunter's vision activated, seemed unable to believe what his eyes saw. Aurelia returned and commented that exactly what she feared was happening, and for that reason, she ordered them to leave the horses and continue on foot. The heroine slapped the horse's flank, which neighed, and the two took off running. Then the adventurers began to run as fast as they could down the road in the opposite direction. Amidst their long strides, Noah asked what was happening, and Aurelia replied that it was an eclipse. Noah looked at the sun, curious about the information, but received an elbow from his partner, who told the idiot not to do that. The protagonist wanted to know why, and Aurelia began to explain that when the suns and the moon aligned, day turned into night. In parallel to the heroes, the rabbit received his nickname of Killer under the face of the eclipse, where the observer cast his gaze upon the world. The creature touched the yes of the system, and an evil spirit consumed him. The fire eyes of the sorceress contrasted with the eyes of darkness, which commanded the new servant to instill madness in those who crossed his path. The sinister rabbit then had his soul corrupted by the madness of the observer. As long as the eclipse lasted, the monsters went into a frenzy and the zombies reappeared with their hordes, Aurelia said, squeezing Noah's arm. Now they had to find a safe place while they were not hunted. In the eclipse, the search for survival was not to look back, but alert to the dangers that lurked just ahead. The hero's escape continued while the observer judged the souls of those he could reach. Noah sensed the danger from the system's information and wondered if the others were seeing or feeling the same as he was. For the observer wanted to be looked at, and our hero tried in every way to resist the temptation, until Aurelia noticed the presence of something, and asked Noah to protect the family. Aurelia screamed and attacked with her flames a zombie bear that appeared fiercely before her. She struck it repeatedly, the creature resisted strongly. Meanwhile, Noah kept the citizens protected in the rear, but he drew his blades and, with the hungry eyes of the void, ordered the family to flee as fast as they could. However, a serpent appeared stealthily, but the protagonist's eyes detected it. Then, with a quick strike, he cut the creature in half. Aurelia continued her battle with the zombie beast, and Shia, who watched everything horrified behind Leon, did not notice a hand crawling in her direction. A zombie lunged at the woman and grabbed her leg with its cold, putrid fingers. Shia screamed for help, trying to free herself from the monster while still holding Arios in her lap. Then Noah approached and threw his dagger at the zombie, to then finish it off with ease. Noah supported Shia in his arms, but the woman ended up having her ankle affected by the monster. And our protagonist, realizing the severity of the injury, did not hesitate and cut the palm of his hand to save her from transformation. He placed Tony over the woman's wound and said he would heal her. Meanwhile, Leon showed that he was also good at fighting and made the teddy bear grow and fight against the zombie bear. Aisha felt the pain diminish and, supported by Noah, managed to return to the others. Aurelia and the teddy bear dealt with the big monster, but in the distance, silhouettes were forming and the sorceress had a bad omen. They began to run from the zombies, and Aurelia, with unmatched acrobatic skill, jumped onto the back of the good bear. She held hands with Noah and the family, who also climbed onto the animal. They fled until Leon pointed to a place that could serve as refuge until the eclipse passed, and Aurelia shot her fiery blasts at the zombies and they rode towards the cave proposed by the sculptor. The dead burned with each blow, but suddenly one of them jumped at our heroes, and with its enraged eyes and putrid skin, which once belonged to a young man, pushed our protagonist off the mount. Noah tried to free himself from the zombie boy, when suddenly he saw the creature's head consumed by Aurelia's flames. Then our hero activated his blink and quickly returned to the back of the animal right behind the escorted family. They stared at Noah, worried, and the sorceress asked if he had been bitten, but the protagonist replied that he was fine. The group finally reached the cave, but Noah fell off the horse, or rather the bear, with the animal's skid. While they studied the entrance of the refuge, Aurelia noticed that the zombies were not advancing. It was then that a cold sweat tear ran down Leon's face, as he realized what the possible hiding place was, and a colossal form with sparkling eyes began to emerge from the shadows. But while the enormous creature leaned into the darkness, Aurelia had not realized the danger. Our heroes were cornered between the horde of zombies and the threatening eyes emerging from the cave, and Aurelia was overcome by a sensation she was not used to, until the great dragon snake presented itself, bringing terror and fear to those who faced it. The feeling was so horrible that Noah found himself without hope of staying alive. They could not move, then everything seemed to be the end. The sorceress fought against that absolute power while the fragility of Erios exploded into childish tears. The dragon was leaving its den and sniffed our heroes who remained petrified. There was only despair, and Noah lamented not being able to save the little boy. But suddenly, something unusual happened in Noah's eyes. The dragon took a liking to Erios, who gently petted it. The happiness and childlike purity were the key. And so the boy received a scale from the dragon, which removed all terror. Relief and peace returned to Noah and the others' consciousness, until the beast returned to the lair where it protected its egg, and they're warned that they could stay until the false night passed. Noah and Aurelia seemed incredulous at such luck, but they showed gratitude for the dragon's maternal instinct, and so they remained hidden until the twilight of time completely faded away. When the coast was clear, they left the dragon's cave and decided to camp, with Leon offering to gather some firewood. Noah looked back and up at the sky, making sure this wasn't a dream, until he acquired the touch of destiny where his luck increased. And he realized that this reality was becoming more and more a part of his being. He slept while they camped, and Aurelia woke him up to switch the watch. Our protagonist got up, stretching contentedly from the rest, until Leon commented on Noah's constitution being high for his level. For him, sleep time was crucial for recovery according to levels, meaning the higher the constitution, the less sleep time needed. So Noah, curious, asked if the man didn't sleep, and Leon replied that he just took short naps. And showing the teddy bear, the sculptor mentioned that it needed repairs after the battle and therefore preferred to use his free time to fix it. Noah said he was surprised by the toy's craftsmanship, and Leon said that Cub was his first sculpture and therefore he had some control over making it grow whenever he wanted. The invention intrigued our protagonist, and so he wanted to know if he felt pain even without being alive. Leon was amused by the concern but assured the young man that the doll did not feel pain. However, he imagined that if he kept Cub large for longer, he could provide it with a better life. And Noah supposed that the man cared a lot for the little one, leaving Leon somewhat blushing but revealing that his dream was to make a sculpture indistinguishable from the real. Noah, already pondering his experiences with emptiness, asked if it was possible to do so, and the sculptor replied that probably not, but he would never stop trying. Noah checked his profile in the system, and he was very pleased to notice that he had evolved in several attributes. Then he began to slide his finger across the screen to learn a bit more about the new skills, until he discovered that his resistance to terror had evolved to level 3. Noah realized it was a new ability received after the encounter with the cave dragon. He then added it to his status, which soon increased his XP bar. Noah celebrated the increase in all his attributes like a goal, but his body suddenly began to tremble and freeze, and Leon brought his hand to his face at Noah's sheer naivety in the world of suspended screens and systematic evolutions. The sculptor approached Noah suggesting rest, but the young man insisted he was fine, even with the tremors. However, Liam was emphatic in stating exactly the opposite to our stubborn one and explained that the increase in aura created an overload in his body. Noah tried to hold firm, so Leon asked him to at least try to meditate as he would keep watch. Our hero struggled to control the pain and gradually began to rhythm his breathing, until he reached the meditative state necessary to balance his energies. Then his mana regeneration evolved to level 2 and gradually restored until reaching 100%. Leon kept an eye on the young man, who became calmer with the recovery. Then he decided to explain the correct distribution scale of attributes to Noah so there wouldn't be an excess of energy. Noah brought his hands to his chin, absorbing the information, and looked back at the system until he found the option to channel mana to observe the life force interesting. And suddenly, he found himself engulfed by a green energy emanating from all sides. He returned to normal and found himself staring at one of the sleeping bags, until he noticed Shia and Arios sleeping with the dragon scale in hand and discovered that the source of all that energy came from there. Noah asked how the boy's recovery was going, and Leon replied that his fever had almost completely passed, and for that reason he was hopeful. The protagonist suggested that Leon keep the scale hidden, as it had a lot of life force, and the man commented that he would make a necklace and leave the rest of the scale with the boy. The new day arrived, and the three warriors were ready to continue their journey. For at the end of the eclipse, the monsters were exhausted, and Aurelia believed they should reach Windrus before dawn. Leon stepped away from our heroes to wake his wife and child, and Noah took the opportunity to ask the sorceress if she was all right. Then Aurelia, despite her worried expression from the recent events, replied that everything was in order, but she confessed that she was still a bit disturbed by their luck in having come out alive after the encounter with the dragon. Meanwhile, Liam strangely went to wake Aisha, and giving a sidelong glance at the heroes, informed his wife that it was time to leave. The sculptor took the scale with his son and said he would keep it for precaution. They continued their journey, and Noah was worried about Aurelia's strange demeanor. The next day, a beautiful city protected by large walls was observed by some men who were flying over it with a winged mechanism. And Noah was astonished, imagining they could be giant eagles. But Aurelia explained that they were feathered gliders and that they used wind mana, allowing them to soar over great distances. The sorceress told Noah that the sensation of flying was wonderful and that she would show him how it worked as soon as they arrived in the city. Our protagonist noticed that the city had no entrance gate and asked if they were on the opposite side. But Aurelia pointed to the wall where there was a moving elevator, which left Noah dumbfounded. It took the means of transport, and Noah looked like a child in an amusement park, gazing upwards, until the elevator ascended rapidly, and our boy displayed a newly unlocked fear. With their spirits controlled, they enjoyed the view as they reached the top of the wall. When they entered the city, Aurelia commented that she wasn't carrying her adventurer's badge and that they would need to go through security. As they walked, Leon called out to the adventurers and, as a token of gratitude, gave them some level C mana stones without specification as a reward. Aisha also thanked the heroes and expressed confidence in Arios' improvement, who was playing in her lap, enchanted by the city. Noah and Aurelia looked incredulously at the stones, and the sorceress, who knew the ropes, said it was quite a high payment. Leon smiled contentedly and asked them to accept it graciously, as he had no words to thank them for everything they had done. In front of the gates for inspection, Noah identified himself to the guard with his right hand over a stone. As soon as the rock glowed, the guard asked if Noah was a member of one of the 3 cults, and the boy replied that he was not. The guard, who was noting down the information, asked if our protagonist had a criminal record, and Noah denied it as well. Thus, he entered and found Aurelia disguised with a cloak, and the system updated the list of completed missions, distributing more rewards to Noah, who, without wasting time, went to check his profile, to Aurelia's dismay, with the boy who couldn't tear himself away from the screen of his phone, or rather the system. Noah received a tome that served as a dimensional pocket and judged it as a new inventory, but much better. The heroes stopped in front of a large balcony, and Noah showed himself eager for the official title of adventurer, making the sorceress proud of her pupil. Aurelia took him to try out the city's winged mechanism as promised, and when everything was ready for them to fly, the woman put a mask over her face that the system identified as a veil that altered even the voice of the wearer, making Noah find it quite frightening. But for Aurelia, it was better to stay that way and remain alive than to be found by her old group of traitors. They walked to the open part of the balcony while many people took relaxed flights. Noah stopped at the starting point, and his legs trembled at the height of the place. Then Aurelia said she would go first and asked the boy to follow her when he felt safe. But Noah said nothing and stood frozen, swallowing saliva behind his nervous smile. Aurelia prepared herself and launched herself with the mastery of a bird of prey, which left our hero speechless and confident to make his debut jump. Then the wings extended, leaving him somewhat stunned, but with confidence he took a few more steps forward. And thus he jumped, feeling the wind brush against his face continuously. But the people who saw him jump looked curiously at the boy's posture, and he himself thought that something was not quite right. However, he remembered that the guy on the platform said the wings worked on their own through the air mana stone and were connected to the mechanism in his body. Thus, he found the stability needed to enjoy the ride. Aurelia, watching the boy enjoy the flight, said she missed that experience, but it was time to hurry to the guild's headquarters. Then Noah leaned forward and overtook the sorceress, betting that the last to arrive would pay for dinner. Noah was flying, spinning like it was the happiest moment of his life, until suddenly he collided with another glider, and he realized that both Aurelia and other adventurers had also joined the race, so he used his blink ability to cover longer distances. But the wing of his mechanism snapped, breaking at the upper shaft. Noah felt, cursing his last generation upon seeing he was barreling towards a vegetable garden. He activated his blink ability again to soften the fall, but the damage to the little garden was already done. At least he managed to get out alive. After the fun, our heroes went to register at the guild, and in front of the door they heard a scream coming from inside. Suddenly, a body was thrown out, and if it weren't for the blink, Noah would have become a bowling pin. Aurelia only had time to turn her head to see the man kiss the mat with gusto, and suddenly, a bipedal lizard type, all about CrossFit, appeared, telling the thug, "Get out of here." Aurelia put her hand to her face, hopelessly remembering that the brute was the master of the local guild. The giant lizard then approached the heroes, asking what they were doing there, and Noah immediately explained that Aurelia had brought him to register as an adventurer, prompting the woman to reveal her identity. The big guy then called out a certain name with his deafening voice to announce that there was a newbie in the area. Then, totally contrasting with the brute, a cute girl appeared to welcome our adventurers. Noah confirmed by looking down as the girl barely reached his waist. Then she smiled and invited our protagonist to enter the guild headquarters. Noah followed the little legs, but was startled when he saw a bunch of big guys sprawled on the floor of the main hall. The girl asked our young man not to worry, as it was training day with the leader, so they only had 5 minutes of sparring without losing friendship, and she reinforced that the members were not dead, just too tired to get up. Noah didn't really enjoy the joke, but he approached the counter where Lil Nay asked if he was familiar with the registration process. Our protagonist shook his head negatively and wondered if the girl wasn't too young for the job, but she, being half celestial, was much older than the curious one. Aurelia interrupted the registration to ask if she could get another adventurer's plate on site, as she had lost hers in the last campaign with the Iron Fists. The receptionist then asked for a moment to confirm. She approached a bookshelf and confirmed that for a reissue of the plate, a payment of 12 level F mana stones would be necessary. Aurelia made the payment and received her new adventurer's plate. Then they wanted to know if the sorceress needed anything else, and our heroine said she was giving the green light to make Noah an adventurer, and since he was new in Arander, it was for the receptionist to review everything needed. Noah appeared anxious, but Aurelia asked him not to worry, as it was a necessary formality to protect him even as a citizen, like generating a CPF. Nay explained that foreigners register in institutions and make their payments or swear allegiance to the rulers or administrative bodies, but here it was free. And realizing that Noah did not belong to any affiliations or have an identity card, they would need to make one. The girl also handed over a form to be filled out, which Noah used the system to read like an interactive translator. The protagonist was reading the adhesion term, and Nay commented that he could take as long as he wanted with the contract or ask a specialist to analyze it. Noah followed the girl to a private room where he placed his hand on a stone similar to the one at the city entrance. Before those sacred runes, the little one asked again if he was involved with any of the three cults, and logically Noah denied. But Nay, interpreting the lights of the rock, revealed that Noah's answer was a half-truth, and therefore the protagonist should explain himself better. Noah felt the sweat trickle down his face as he thought about how to explain his true nature. Then, without ceremony, he told everything, from how he arrived in that world to the abyssal experiment he eliminated in the mines. With wide, curious eyes, the receptionist cleared her throat and said, "Next question, my young man." Aurelia, attentive, saw Noah respond that he felt neutral when asked if he was a friend or enemy of the people of Arandar, but that he was always willing to help. Nay gave Noah a list of paths to check if he was aligned with the bad things. But our prota, despite having all of his paths based on emptiness, did not belong to any of that sinister list. The little one looked at the shining rock and informed that they were almost at the end of the tests, but something left her expression worried. However, she was interrupted by the bell ringing, and the boss entered, apologizing for the interruption, but he couldn't help but overhear the conversation that was going on. And Noah looked intrigued at the imposing lizard, who said in his guttural voice, "You are a foreigner. Did I hear that right?" Almost choked up, Noah confirmed, wondering if he would be the next to fly out the door. But the Draconian commented that Noah was the third he had met and thus extended his hand, introducing himself as Razor Draken. Our hero, almost melting, shook the leader's hand, who suggested a combat evaluation. Without further ado, Razor lifted Noah onto his shoulders and took him for a fun ride. Noah tried to call for help from the little one as the heavy steps of the big lizard gradually distanced themselves. And before leaving, the Draconian turned to Nay and said, "Prepare the training field because today the Jirapoka goes to Pew." Noah tried to call his mother, but nothing in this world or another could pull him from Razor's grasp. Razor simply jumped from the third floor with Noah on his back, and the guy was so hulking that he cracked the ground upon landing. The boss threw Noah to the ground and called him to the fight to discover what our big boy was made of. So Noah asked if the lizard could give him a moment to prepare, and Razor smiled, indicating the waiting room that was right next door. The door closed like lightning, and Noah used the space to recover from that first aggressive impression of the boss. Lonely and under no pressure, our protagonist opened the system to devise a strategy, pulling out one of his textbooks. Noah took the tom from his dimensional pocket that allowed him to use the astral energy of his soul to create a kind of cloud storage for everything he had. Razor pounded on the door, eager to show the boy how many scales it takes to make a lizard. And Noah, who needed a bit more time, noticed a vase on the table and thought it was a good object to test his new ability. However, when he absorbed the vase, he had the slight impression that it was in his pants pocket. So he commanded the jar to his hand and was stunned to realize that he could now teleport objects with extreme ease. But he didn't even have time to celebrate as Razor burst through the door, asking if the rookie was ready. Noah replied that he was, and the Draconian leader asked him to show his fighting skills. There was a brief silence as Noah assessed Razor from a distance. Then the leader said that if Noah landed a hit on him, he could move on to the next house. No, wait, that's another story. Noah scratched his head, as the task didn't seem that difficult. And the convinced crowd encouraged our hero to see him take some good hits while Aurelia remained silent next to a girl with glasses who was taking notes. Razor's eyes were intimidating, and he crossed his arms, waiting for the boy's moves. And suddenly, the aura of the cocky lizard surged by over 1,000,000 points. Aurelia saw Razor order Remy, the girl with glasses beside him, to be the referee of the match, and so she did, nodding her head. Noah and Razor faced each other in front of the spectators, and Remy, with her hand extended, created tension to officialize the fight. Until she said, "Fight." Noah ran like an arrow and drew his blades to leap at the Draco. Then he activated his blink ability and attacked Razor, who remained still. But the Draconian was experienced, and noticing that Noah was behind him, spun with a rotating punch that our hero dodged by mere millimeters. However, the dodge wasn't enough, and Noah felt Razor's hand weigh on his stomach, flying backward from the impact. Our hero crashed against the wall, but even all battered, he maintained a satisfied expression. Razor applauded the boy for his teleportation and autonomous storage skills, confessing that he almost caught him off guard. Noah, still trembling, subtly took the dagger in his hand while staring at the lizard. Then his eyes glowed with an intense crimson as he activated his life force ability. Razor noticed that Noah wanted to continue and let his aura burn to the maximum as well. Noah channeled the dark energy of the void and attacked the guild leader again. Incredibly, our protagonist threw the dagger and teleported it from one point to another to hit the opponent with a hat-trick strategy. But who is king never loses his majesty, and Razor caught the blade before being surprised and commented that Noah's void power was astonishing. But Noah didn't care and delivered another sideways strike. The Draconian, on the other hand, grabbed Noah by the hands as if he were a heavy shopping bag, and suggested that the boy have a spear to complement his fighting style. But suddenly, Razor saw Noah escape from his grasp with another teleportation. And Noah, who was trembling from the high energy expenditure, heard the leader mention that the spear would increase the range power of his abilities, and so Razor punched the dagger, considering it was little to defeat him. Noah, who was kneeling to contain the pain, saw his daggers fall in between him and the opponent, and Razor warned that now it was his turn to show his power. Noah and Aurelia were anxious about the kind of power Razor had up his sleeve. The lizard suddenly ran, sinking the concrete beneath him and vanished before everyone's eyes, which made Noah wonder if Razor also used teleportation. However, his thoughts were interrupted by the guildmaster's attack, who slammed the ground again. For Noah had dodged, but noticed that the guy was as fast as lightning. Razor laughed and praised the boy's reflexes, showing himself pleased with his performance. However, with hungry eyes, he warned that this was just his warm-up, and he flew with all his strength and speed towards Noah, who moved his fist to parry the blow with his dagger, and once again was thrown back by Razor's punch, which resembled a walking sledgehammer. Only this time our hero fell balanced with the blink activated, and saw the lizard almost break the void to crush him mercilessly. Noah only had time to raise his grafted arm to protect himself. However, the impact was so strong that Tony got stained with tomato sauce. Razor grabbed Noah's arm and threw him to the ground, positioning himself on top of him. Growling, the guild leader wanted to know how the boy had managed to graft a void monster onto his own arm. Razor's knee was on Noah's diaphragm, who couldn't breathe to respond. Then he placed his foot at the height of the lizard's chest and made his dark aura emerge, which was noticed by the opponent. Suddenly, the leader fell to the side, applying a leg lock on our hero, and said that Noah was making a mistake, as this type of magic made the body work against the user, since even Razor's aura was restricting him. The lizard continued to warn about the danger of the graft, and Noah discreetly opened the system screen with the dimensional pocket behind the big guy, who didn't feel when Noah sucked his leather pants into the inventory. Aurelia was incredulous at her protege's attitude, but it was already done. Leader without pants in front of everyone, and Noah in teleportation. All normal here. Noah, distance, was trying to recover, and surprisingly, Razor liked the boy's originality. So he stood up without pants and asked the boy to show more of his power, suddenly throwing the dagger towards Noah, who could do nothing at first. But our protagonist activated the Astral Walker to pull the dagger and entered the dimensional portal, intending to regain his strength. And there, before his reflection in the blade, he tried to find ways to hit someone stronger and faster than him. Then, as if nothing was happening, the pot of stones floated and touched his back as if to say, "I'm here, baby." And Noah promptly smiled with his million-dollar ideas. Noah opened the pot while hearing Razor grumble that he was playing dirty. But he quickly returned to reality and shot the rocky projectiles towards the lizard, who felt his eyes blur with the meteor shower against his face. Several void portals opened above Razor, who was hit multiple times by the stones. Genius. But his life is not a strawberry. Noah's mana ran low, and as a last attempt, he returned to the physical world, stretching Tony's hand to touch Razor's scales, who noticed immediately and grabbed our hero's arm. "Not here, baby." Then he grabbed Noah and took him to the ground again. But Noah smiled and warned, "Behind you, handsome." Suddenly, Noah's daggers emerged from the astral, aimed at Razor's back and stabbed his back, catching him off guard. Razor stood up and stretched his hand towards Noah, congratulating him on his victory. Then, emphatically, Remy announced that Noah had passed the combat test, and the crowd applauded, incredulous and excited. The adventurers who witnessed Noah's victory wanted to know his rank at all costs, and one of them, with a book in hand, exclaimed that he was the 48th, being in the top 50. Noah couldn't move a muscle in the face of the ovation. He, not understanding what was happening, questioned Remy about the commotion. Then the girl explained that they had a record of how long they lasted in fights against the master, as today Razor had already fought 174 times against adventurers of rank D and above. Noah was in shock, but not because of his position, but because the big lizard had fought, counting on him, 175 times that day. Noah was surprised by the amount of evolution achieved solely through sparring training, but the main thing was the blink ability that reached level 10, allowing him to access astral rifts, and he wondered how far he could teleport now. Then he went to read about the structure of space and found it interesting to be able to peep between realms, becoming increasingly resistant to magic. Noah walked through the guild headquarters until he opened a door and saw Aurelia talking to Na, but by the expression on both of their faces, he thought he hadn't arrived at a good time, as the small girl was reporting that some abyssal scum had escaped right under her nose. And Noah, joining the conversation, wanted to know if Nay was referring to Aurelia's previous group. Then the sorceress assumed it was far from being an isolated case. They said she was mapping the case due to the disappearances, as many of them were linked to missions that certain guild members had accepted. The girl was outraged, as if people lost faith in the guilds, it would be a total disaster, especially with those cultist members acting in the shadows. Noah asked if Aurelia had found the traitors, but according to the sorceress, her last lead was that they were on some mission near Windrest. Nay brought her fingers to her head and focused her magic to help Aurelia search for the suspects in specific places. And when the papers began to float around the room, Noah was astonished by the girl's power, which Aurelia whispered was the magic of fate. Until suddenly, Nay focused on one of the papers and caught it in the air, promptly revealing that Aquarius was the location of the new search for our heroes, which made Aurelia bow to the mage in gratitude. However, Nay asked them to consider this an official mission to track down the Iron Fists and bring them to the guild. And when the system updated the new mission, which was called Vengeful Hunt, the small receptionist only asked for one thing: bring one of them back alive. After the day at the guild, Noah wanted to buy a spear, and Aurelia told him to follow her, as if she knew the right place for that. Sorceress guided Noah through a kind of tunnel, and the boy felt somewhat apprehensive about the place as they descended a staircase. Then they reached a wooden door with a sign hanging, and Aurelia turned the doorknob while greeting someone named Josiah who was in the room. The boy opened a genuine smile and seemed quite familiar with the fire parakeet, but that nickname is only for those close. You see, chat. He hugged Aurelia, saying he missed her, and the sorceress returned the affection sincerely. Then she introduced Noah, who waved somewhat shyly at the young man with an easy smile, who promptly shook our protagonist's hand cordially. Aurelia mentioned that Jose came from a renowned family of craftsmen and had become a great friend of hers, also being responsible for making her gauntlets. The young man then smiled modestly, and noticing that Aurelia wasn't wearing the gauntlets, wanted to know what had happened. The sorceress explained that she had been captured by the cultists and lamented losing all her equipment. But Josiah, all cheerful, said he had a new fire spell in hand and was eager to test it, and Aurelia was definitely the right person for that. Without further ado, the sorceress accepted to the delight of the good vibes boy, and not forgetting Noah, of course, who wanted a spear that matched his fighting style. Josiah then asked our hero to accompany him to choose the perfect spear. Noah followed the boy into a room with various weapons displayed side by side. Then Josiah showed an invoked spear that had a triple attack ability when executing a strike almost simultaneously. Noah saw the craftsman show another spear in a spiral shape that sent blades of wind through magic. With so many options, Josiah left our hero free to make his choices. Noah walked through the arsenal until something caught his attention. A red spear imbued with blood, so powerful that it could even kill its wielder. And with great interest, our protagonist asked to take a look, and he was drooling over the weapon that was imbued with a crimson rot of a dying warrior spirit remaining from the sacred Valkyries. Noah chose his spear and wanted to know how much it cost, which left Jose somewhat perplexed. Jose dropped his friendly demeanor and tried, politely out of respect for Aurelia, to inform Noah that the makeover spear was not for sale. The young man, holding the shaft with a cloth, explained that he only kept the spear in his arsenal because he hoped to remove its crimson rot magic. Noah looked seriously at the young man as he explained that if a limb were infected by the spear's magic, the only option for healing was to amputate it, in addition to needing a resistance to rot that few people in the world possessed. Noah raised his eyebrows mysteriously and lifted his grafted hand, asking to at least conduct a test. However, Jose appeared hesitant and warned that the magic could destroy even his false arm, so he apologized but said the deal would not be closed. Nevertheless, Noah tried to persuade the young man and claimed to have certain traits that would allow him to wield that weapon. Suddenly, Aurelia's voice emerged at the door, asking to let the protagonist take the weapon, as that conversation had dragged on too long, and Jose, incredulous, reminded his friend how dangerous rot magic could be. Aurelia agreed with the craftsman but mentioned that she had seen Noah bombarded by necrotoxins and still came out unscathed. Moreover, if Joji refused, the clever one would simply teleport in the dead of night and steal the spear anyway. The craftsman nearly choked upon learning that Noah had teleportation skills. Then, reluctantly, he sold the spear for 8 Class D mana stones and warned that the cautious live longer. Noah tried to haggle for 5 stones, and Joji ended up conceding with a sour expression. Leaving with his new toy, Noah asked if the craftsman had the tome for proficiency in spears, and the young man replied that he would sell it for 2 more mana stones. And so he handed the tome to Noah, who also received a new outfit as a bonus. Aurelia just watched the boys make their deals, and Noah, not wasting any time, quickly acquired the necessary information in the system about handling the weapon and its qualities. Jose commented that Noah had chosen a difficult weapon to wield, and that if our hero wanted to return it, he wouldn't do so for the same price. Supply and demand, you know. Noah donned the coat that made him look like a power metal vocalist and thus said goodbye alongside Aurelia to the nice craftsman. Our protagonist wanted to test the spear as soon as possible, but Aurelia, like a mother vetoing her child's new toy, only allowed him to use the weapon after dinner. And Noah, full of sulk, questioned why he couldn't have fun. But he became interested when Aurelia suggested they check out the astral rift of the castle. Noticing the young man's curiosity, the sorceress said that the castle was built over a rift that led to the astral plane of winds, and Noah liked the idea. They stood watching the show of flying men, and Noah wanted to enjoy the spectacle more. However, Aurelia said she had more important things to do than babysit a guy flirting with the town girls. And despite accepting the lecture, our protagonist justified that he just wanted to stay until the song ended, as he wasn't flirting. But the guy couldn't stop looking back, and Aurelia nearly punched the stud in the face. Noah admitted that the herb-selling girl was cute, but Aurelia disillusioned him by saying she was nothing more than a herbalist thief. Aurelia explained that these girls targeted tourists, inviting them to drink by offering their herbal specialties. But then they would steal even their underwear if necessary. Noah, still smitten, commented that the drinks didn't affect him. So the sorceress let go of his hand and went ahead, impatient with testosterone. They arrived at a large castle where the local governor lived. Aurelia stopped and stared at its towers, and Noah approached without saying anything. The sorceress told him that there was also the temple of Avera, the goddess of winds and wisdom. And according to legends, she was responsible for opening the astral rifts in that region, which made Noah wonder if the gods could open them at will. Aurelia confirmed in response, but mentioned that there were rifts capable of opening on their own in nature. Noah also wanted to know a bit more about the deity Avera, and Aurelia said that if they were lucky, they would find her in the temple. And to ensure that nothing would go out of control, she advised Noah to show respect if the goddess appeared. So to defend himself, Noah replied that he wasn't 4 years old. However, for Aurelia, 4 years was a mature age for someone throwing a tantrum over a spear. Noah felt that in his heart, but Aurelia enjoyed having managed to tease him this time. Until our protagonist saw a kind of fairy spinning and dancing before his eyes. Then Aurelia commented that these fluffy creatures were air elementals, very common around those parts like fireflies in a dark place. Noah wanted to know if they wandered around all the time, and the sorceress explained that this was the temple of the goddess of air, so they flew freely. Our hero tried to socialize with one of the little beings, but got bitten on the finger with gusto. The little creature then flew away and complained that Noah smelled of emptiness. Aurelia looked back, reprimanding the young man, but he explained that he tried to be nice and the fairy simply attacked him because he stank. The sorceress almost spat from laughing, and she said she couldn't disagree with the elemental, although she herself would never have the courage to say that so openly to the Lord of Astral Hygiene. They entered the temple, and Noah came across the image of Avera and her familiar deity named Vedi, while a vortex of energy swirled beneath his feet. Noah asked if the vortex was an astral rift, and Aurelia confirmed, saying that one could probably feel a torrent of air emanating from it. The young man walked towards the rift, but one of the fairies promptly blocked his path and invited Noah to visit her home, for, according to her, the Great Mother would love to meet the Stinky One. Noah stood before the portal while the little elemental curiously insisted that he enter her home. The vortex seduced Noah insistently, so he told Aurelia what was happening, and the sorceress expressed some disbelief. Noah confessed that he felt tempted to enter, but Aurelia explained that if he did, he would be torn into 1,000 pieces until his mana completely disappeared. However, our hero did not feel intimidated and asked Aurelia to hold his hand so they could discover together what was inside, but the woman firmly refused. And when she tried to convince him to give up the stupid idea, Noah simply activated Blink and left Aurelia's line of sight. Then he grabbed the sorceress and jumped into the vortex, which sucked them in like a black hole. However, the lights were intense in the place, and Noah widened his eyes to identify everything around him, while the fairy guided them through numerous doors that formed in that astral corridor. They kept following until they suddenly fell into the astral plane of winds. Aurelia, indignant, asked what the crazy guy thought he was doing. But suddenly, they heard a soft voice wishing them welcome, and a magnificent and imposing woman sitting on her throne remarked that it had been a long time since she had received interesting visitors. She stared at our heroes with glamour and curiosity, while Aurelia couldn't believe what she saw before her eyes. But Noah was more interested in knowing what ability the beautiful woman used to enhance her impeccable lip filling. However, the goddess smiled at Noah's audacity to try to identify her through her astral system. Curious, he asked how she knew him, and Aurelia quickly spun to our protagonist to ask for good manners with the deity. But the goddess didn't seem to care and solemnly informed that she knew many things, for she was the goddess of wisdom. Then she took a chick sip of champagne to moisten her royal throat. Noah suddenly felt a jolt in his neck, and Aurelia, forcing him to bow, apologized to Avera for the insolence, as they had no intention of bothering her, and explained that the idiot beside her had no business following the elementals into the portal. But Avera said she was having fun and mentioned that she kept the portal open for the elementals to pass freely and did not expect anyone to enter. The fairy suddenly whispered in the goddess's ear, and Avera announced that the little being found Noah a very interesting person, but Aurelia interjected to assert that, in fact, the protagonist was just a fool. The sorceress emphasized that the hero's parents should have let him fall as a child to think it would be cool to just jump into an astral rift out of nowhere. The goddess then rose certainly and told Aurelia to relax, for she did not consider Noah's entry through the portal a mistake. For destiny is a capricious thing, and in any case it would have dragged him, at least what he carries with him. Avera sensed that Noah smelled of emptiness and snapped her fingers to give the young man a light bath. The protagonist then suddenly felt as if he were inside an astral car wash, and found it strange that after everything, he was still dry. Avera elegantly descended the steps of her throne and said she cleaned the dirt that Noah had collected in Arander, especially the little parasite of emptiness he had created. Then she floated close to the young man and simply opened the system screen to remove the Kremunhouse spear he had bought from Josiah. Avera commented that the weapon belonged to a member of the Scarlet Valkyries that was once led by Relina. She examined the spear and said that now she could see its contamination, but revealed that even that rot could become a blessing if used correctly. Avera revealed that Noah had received the touch of Relina on his destiny and asked if he was aware of it and if she had returned after the incident. But the protagonist had no idea who the goddess was talking about or even that the spear had anything to do with her. Then Aurelia explained that Relina was an ancient goddess of war who led the valuable order of the Valkyries. Avra said that the spear was one of her weapons and that Noah needed to find the goddess, as he was marked in his destiny. Then suddenly, our protagonist had a lapse of memory, and from his subconscious, he awakened the vision of the goddess trying to save him. But despite his efforts, he was confused. Avra looked at Noah and smiled. She placed a spear in Noah's hand with hope for the goddess's return, and said that the mark on the young man's destiny would guide him if he followed her guidance. Lady Avra asked that if Noah found Relina, he should deliver the message that she was still waiting for her promise. Then, Aurelia asked for permission to ask a question, which was promptly granted by the goddess. The sorceress wanted to know if she had information about the abyssal cultists infiltrated in the guild as innocent people were dying. But the goddess, despite all her knowledge, could not help them with these matters, even if she wanted to very much. Avra explained that the void protected all who were under its shadow, and therefore could not perceive their steps. Aurelia thanked her, though saddened by the situation, but the goddess said that in one specific thing she could help them. Thus, Avra made her extensive library available for the studies of our heroes and confessed that she collected many objects, even having a rock album, and she would let them use it if the duo had or knew of something that the goddess of wisdom was unaware of. The two were thoughtful for a while, and Noah remembered something but out of caution preferred not to say it out loud. Then he whispered in Avra's ear, who was taken aback by the gossip. Aurelia watched everything with her blank expression, but Noah assured the goddess with familiarity that the guy from the exclusive subject was still considered a legend. Avra granted the heroes access but asked that they not disturb Vedi, as she was not very fond of strangers. As they left, Aurelia wanted to know what Noah had said to the goddess, and he explained that it was a gossip from the rock world of his realm. Avra continued to drink her divine champagne, and Noah, not missing the opportunity, told the sorceress that she could no longer underestimate his dealings with the gods. Noah was enjoying the knowledge in Avra's books, until he decided to wake up Tony, the sleepiest arm in history, to have a chat. So our protagonist took off the ring of victual that he still kept with him and told the little hand that it might want to go out and have some fun. Noah put the ring on his finger and asked Tony if he could inhabit the artifact. A dark energy began to emerge from the arm, and the boy understood it as a yes. And suddenly, Tony's eye began to compress and transferred itself to the cultist ring. Noah had fun with the situation while the parasite observed everything. Our protagonist asked if the eye could detach from the ring, and after a few attempts, Noah saw wings forming on the parasite, which transformed into a small eye bat. Tony flew up to the highest shelves and began to read the books through the system. This made Noah notice new abilities on his sheet, as well as considerable evolutions in his paths. Noah started to put the books away, and one of the fairies approached to say that the mother goddess liked the stinky one. Then, quite excited, the elemental wanted to show something to our hero and flew off for him to follow. Noah noticed that the fairy invited him to another astral rift, so he moved his lips in curiosity and thus crossed the barrier. On the other side, the little air creature continued to guide him through a kind of garden with a fountain, and Noah showed himself surprised by the objects sculpted in flowers where the water flowed calmly. Several elementals flew alongside Noah until they began to dive into the fountain, and the protagonist discovered that there was another world hidden beneath the surface of the water. Noah thought about submerging his grafted hand, but a voice behind him suggested that he not do that. He turned around, and a kind of giant pigeon asked who the mortal was that tired its beauty. Noah then explained that he was in the library and decided to take a stroll through an astral rift and presumed that the bird was Vedi. The dove seemed a bit irritated that Avra kept pulling mortals into her world. She stared at Noah and wondered why the goddess chose someone who smelled so much of emptiness and decay this time. But Vedi herself answered upon realizing that Noah was bound to some fate, and thus it was not Avra's fault that the stinky human was present. Noah, still somewhat confused about this fate thing, asked the blue dove how it worked that he had been guided there and such. She then explained that, although there are infinite possibilities, the guided fate is the one most likely to happen. Noah was then taken aback when Vedi said that he had a connection to that place and therefore fate would lead him there anyway. However, with fate or not, our protagonist disturbed Vedi's sleep, who asked him to leave before she became furious. Noah bowed and asked permission for a question to the blue dove, who turned curiously towards the young man. He then told her about his spear and that he had tried in every way to find ways to use it, but he found nothing in the library that spoke about the sinister magic trapped within it. Vedi examined the weapon and commented that it was imbued with rot V, and that there was no cure to its touch, or even potions or healers would only worsen the damage caused. Noah inquired about what to do, and the dove replied that he should connect with the spirit of the spear, letting it run freely within his being. For then the spirit would recognize him as its master, but Noah would have to master the force before the rot consumed him completely. Noah stared at the spear, and promptly the system updated his mission to bond with the spirit. It was enough for the protagonist to remove the cloth that covered the weapon and present himself as the guy who took risks. Vadi thought it was foolish of the young man, but she was willing to watch the spectacle until the end, which, regardless of the outcome, would be etched in her mind. Noah looked at the dove and said, "Watch and you will see." Then he inflicted himself with the rot, which was soon flagged by the system, but curiously his and Tony's abilities resisted all types of diseases manifested by the spear, and suddenly it happened. The red screen asked if Noah would like to create the bond. Noah touched yes and suddenly was transported to a rift or part of the weapon's consciousness where various bodies and skeletons were piled over a river of blood. With the silhouette of a man watching him in the background, Noah then asked in shock what kind of place that was. He stared at the silhouette and asked who he was, but for a few seconds he received no answers. So the video ends here. If you don't want to miss the next part, activate the notification bell, and see you next time on Tob's channel.